This program is brought to you by cable franchise fees and generous donations from viewers like you.
Welcome to the Amherst Planning Board meeting of October 20th, 2021. My name is Doug Marshall, and as the chair of the Amherst Planning Board, I am calling this meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and is available live stream via Amherst Media, and minutes are being taken. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this planning board meeting, including public hearings, will be conducted via remote means using the Zoom platform. The Zoom meeting link is available on the meeting agenda posted on the town website's calendar listing for this meeting, or go to the planning board webpage and click on the most recent agenda, which lists the Zoom link at the top of the page. No in-person attendance of the public is permitted. However, every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the meeting in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so, for reasons of economic hardship or despite best efforts, we will post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the Town of Amherst website. Board members, I will take a roll call. When I call your name, unmute yourself, answer affirmatively, and then place yourselves back on mute. Maria Chow.
Present.
Jack Jemsek.
Here, present.
Tom Long.
Present.
Andrew McDougall is absent. Janet McGowan.
Here.
Johanna Newman.
Here.
And I am here. Board members, if technical issues arise, we may need to pause temporarily to fix the problem and then continue the meeting. If the discussion needs to pause, it will be noted in the minutes. Please raise your hand function to ask a question or make a comment. I will see your raised hand and call on you to speak. After speaking, remember to remute yourself. The general public comment item is reserved for public comment regarding items that are not on tonight's agenda. If appropriate, public comment may also be heard at other times during the meeting. Please be aware the board will not respond to comments during general public comment period. Please indicate you wish to make a comment by clicking the raise hand button when public comment is solicited. If you have joined the Zoom meeting using a telephone, please indicate you wish to make a comment by pressing *9 on your telephone. When called on, please identify yourself by stating your full name and address and put yourself back into mute when finished speaking. Residents can express their views for up to 3 minutes or at the discretion of the planning board chair. If a speaker does not comply with these guidelines or exceeds their allotted time, their participation will be disconnected from the meeting. All right, so the first item on our agenda this evening is minutes. And we have a number of minutes that are ready for review and approval. They are for July 7th, July 14th, August 4th, August 25th, September 1st, and October 6th. And I would like to again thank all the board members and the staff that have worked so hard to get us these minutes and to try to get caught up on our minute taking. All right, so let's see. All right. So Chris, would you like us to try to move these as one collection of minutes, or do we need to go through each one individually?
I think you should go through each one individually. I only received one set of comments, which is from Janet on the first set of minutes, and I sent them to Pam, so she has those. But I think it would be good to go through them individually.
All right. So why don't we start with the July 7th minutes? We'll do them chronologically. Do I have a motion to to approve those minutes? I
So
see
moved.
Johanna's name. You raised your hand.
I'll move to approve the minutes from July 7th.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any comments on the July 7th minutes?
Janet sent in comments, which Pam can show on the screen if she can be so kind. I think
Can
it's
you see them?
page 9.
Yeah. We're done. Okay. Can you see them? They're in red.
Chris, I see your hand.
Would you like Janet to read her suggested additions?
Sure. Janet, would you mind doing that?
So this is when we were talking about the Mitchell Farm property and whether the planning board should recommend to the town council to buy the property because it was coming out of 61A agricultural use. And so I guess basically the first sentence says that McGowan said there's no information about the land itself and they have no basis to make a recommendation. And Jack said something, and then I added that what we know is that it is farmland. It has a river and 2 or 3 streams, actually not streams, and wetlands, and is a floodplain. We don't know anything about its ecological importance, agricultural importance. The planning board has no basis to make a decision other than Mr. Reedy's statements. And then later on, I talked about the master plan because there was a talk about, part of a strategic plan. And I said, master plan is the task for creating an inventory of farmland and priorities and creating a strategic plan for protection. Is there a strategic plan and can we see it? The Conservation Commission and Farm Committee should weigh in on this land. And so that's just a correction.
Okay. Are there other changes you would request? Is there any on the next page or any other pages?
No, and I think just change the word streets to streams, and I think we're good. So.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion to amend the minutes, Janet?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the minutes with the corrections I've stated.
Do we have anyone that would like to second that?
I think that's Jack.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, a second.
Oh, I didn't see your hand raised. I'm sorry. Okay. Does anybody want to talk about this edit at all? Any discussion? Or shall we just vote on Janet's amendments? All right. So I'll go through the members. Janet?
Aye.
Maria?
Approve.
Jack?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Johanna?
Aye.
All right, the amendments are approved. And then let's have a vote on these July 7th minutes. Maria?
Approve.
Janet?
Approve.
Jack?
Approve.
Tom?
Approved.
Johanna?
Approve.
And then I approve as well. And I also vote in favor of the amendment. All right, so that's the July 7th minutes. Next, we have the July 14th minutes. Do we have anyone to move the approval of those?
So moved.
All right, thank you, Jack. And I saw Tom's hand move a little bit.
Second.
Thank you, Tom. Any discussion on the July 14th minutes? Janet?
So, I read these minutes and I recall this as like a 5-hour meeting that we had. And, I didn't listen to the whole meeting again, but from the start, when we're looking at the zoning priorities, we talked to, it says Ms. McGowan was displeased with the process of amendment review and feels rushed. And then there's a long list of Ms. Brestrop's statements. And I went back and listened to that because I remember that section really differently. And it's 4 minutes of me talking about very specific issues I had with the process. And I just felt like it disappeared. I think it'd be great to put these to the side and kind of go through them again, because as I went through it, there was another period of time where basically for 7 minutes, I had raised a bunch of issues with the apartments amendment, and Maureen Pollack and I had this 7-minute back and forth that was really detailed with lots of points, and Maureen disappeared from it. And so I was hoping we could just put these to the side and maybe I could look at a transcript of it to get a better sense, because as I went through it, I just saw I think they're too thin and don't really reflect the discussion that had. Part of it is, I know I'm a minority viewpoint on the committee and I'm often asking more detailed questions. And I just think somebody would read these minutes and not understand what the full discussion was, and not to create a transcript, but not to remove entire sections. So that would be my request, that we just move these aside. And I don't know if there's a transcript, or if maybe Pam can send me that weird link. I don't know if it's from Zoom or YouTube, I can't remember, but I just felt like huge sections were out. And then so I felt like just saying I'm displeased and I feel rushed was sort of trivializing my concerns. And I'm sure you don't want to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Janet. Chris, I see your hand.
I wanted to say that it would be helpful if Janet were to take that on and to try to reconstruct what she said and what she feels happened that night, because we're already struggling with other minutes and we don't want to get further behind. So if Janet sends us language that she would like inserted in the minutes, we'd be happy to bring them back to you next time.
All right. Well, we do have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes. Does anybody object to, I don't know what we would do parliamentary wise, to delaying these, or do people feel they want to proceed and approve them as they are tonight? I see a thumbs up from Jack. I see a hand up from Johanna. Why don't you speak?
Thank you. Where are we at with the open meetings complaint? And is there any potential harm that comes from, delaying these until our next meeting with that regard?
Chris, do you want to answer that?
I don't think there would be any harm. I've answered both open meeting law complaints, and I've told the complainants what the status of the minutes is, and I said that we would post drafts as they became available, and I think the draft of this meeting was posted, and so I think we're probably good for now. We've got a holding pattern, so we can bring these back next time with more edits
whatever
from Janet
wants to add. Okay, we'll put those aside. Moving on to the August 4th minutes. Johanna, is that a legacy hand, or do you want to move the August 4 minutes?
I'll move the August 4th minutes.
Excellent. Anybody want a second? I'm seeing Janet's hand. Are you seconding, Janet?
Yes, second, sorry.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have a motion to approve the August 4 minutes. Any discussion? No discussion. All right, so in that case, I'll do a roll call. Maria?
Approve.
Janet. Janet, I had muted you.
Sorry, approve.
Thank you, Jack.
Aye.
Tom
Aye.
and Johanna.
Aye.
And then I'm an aye. Okay, next, August 25th minutes. Somebody want to move the August 25th minutes? Gosh, okay. All right, thanks, Tom, for raising your hand. Let's record that Tom Long raised his hand, and okay, Jack, I'll recognize you as seconding.
Second, yes.
All right, any discussion of the August 25th minutes? Not seeing any hands. All right, another roll call. Maria,
Approve.
Janet,
I think we're fighting the unmutes. Approve.
thank you. Jack,
Aye.
Tom,
Approved.
and Johanna.
Approve.
And I'm an approve as well. All right, next we have the September 1st minutes. Why don't I move those just for fun? Do we have any seconds? I see Tom's hand raised as a second to the
Second.
September 1st minutes. Any discussion of those minutes? See no hands. All right, roll call. Maria,
Approve.
Janet, tonight you're second, at least based on where the Hollywood squares are on my screen.
I'll second.
Thank you. Jack,
Approve.
Tom,
Approved.
and Johanna.
Approve.
And I'm an approve as well of the September 1st minutes. Finally, we have, I believe, the October 6th minutes. All right, somebody else needs to move these tonight. All right, thanks, Tom. Moved by Tom Long. All right, I see a thumbs up from Jack as a second.
Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion? No discussion. Roll call. Maria,
Approve.
Janet,
Approve.
Jack,
Approve.
Tom,
Approved.
and Johanna,
Approve.
and I'm an approve as well. So we have moved 5 sets of minutes, all of them with the exception of July 14th. All right, so we'll now move on to the second item in the agenda, which is the public comment period. The time is 6:50 p.m. I'll remind the public that comments that you can make during this period cannot be related to the items on our agenda. So they cannot be related to 11 and 13 East Pleasant Street. They cannot be related to the Podic and Cole Conservation Area, nor to the zoning bylaw change related to mixed-use buildings, or the rezoning of map 14A, parcel 33. And so do we have other public comment that relates to topics I have not just named? All right, it looks like we have 18, maybe 13 attendees. Okay, Jay Silverstein, why don't we let him speak? He's got his hand raised. Pam?
Hello, Jay. Can you unmute?
I certainly can.
Hi, Jay.
Basically, I don't understand how you could vote to change the zoning for a parking structure in the.
Jay,
Yeah.
we're not talking about that topic now. This is public comment about things that are not on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
Withdraw.
All right, and Ronnie Parker?
Okay, hi. So
Hi.
I was also talking about the same thing that Jay was going to talk about because it is not on the agenda as far as I can see. But if it is on the agenda, then I'll wait.
Thank you. Yes, it's item 5,
Okay, thank you.
certainly. And then Dorothy Pam, please state your name and your address. I'm sorry, I forgot for the first two.
Dorothy Pam, 229 Amity Street. Just for clarification, when these items are discussed on the agenda, will there be a public comment period after that?
I believe the answer is yes.
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it on the agenda. I'm looking at the agenda, and I don't.
Well,
I see one right now, and I don't see another. So I just want to make sure that people who are here to make a comment on those items will in fact be allowed to speak.
yes, they will be allowed to speak.
Okay. And then my other question to you is, given the rush of zoning things, what items were you anticipating that the public might comment on beside these items? Because maybe
Well, this is an open forum that we have every week. They could speak about anything related to the kind of jurisdiction that the planning board has. It could be about the master plan. It could be, it could be about a sign for all I know. So it's pretty much open.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. Okay, so I guess that'll be it for the public comment period. All right, so now we'll go to the third item on the agenda. And this is a public hearing for a preliminary subdivision plan. The time is 6:54. And this item was on the agenda as item number 3. It's expected to start at 6:35. This is SUB 2022-01, 11-13 East Pleasant Street, Archipelago Investments LLC, continued from August 25th, September 29th, and October 20th, tonight is the 20th. So request approval for a 2-lot preliminary subdivision plan under Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Sections 81L and 81S. Chris, do you want to introduce this?
Yeah, this has been on the agenda of the planning board since August 25th. That's when the public hearing was opened. And then it was continued to September 29th. And then it was continued again until tonight. So we have a letter from Archipelago Investments. Dear planning board members, I'm writing to request that the planning board further extend the 45-day review period for preliminary subdivision plan SUB 2022-01 and continue the public hearing on this application from October 20th to December 1st, 2021. And,
all right, so do we need to vote to continue this again?
Yes.
Okay, so first I see Janet's hand. Janet?
I just have a quick question. Are they proceeding with building 11 East Pleasant Street? Can we have this hearing open and they can start construction? Is there any relationship between those two? Are they going to start building this, or do you have any?
Okay, I think Chris can answer that question. Chris?
I think they're a long way from starting to build this. They need to get their decisions from the planning board, which I wrote to you about this afternoon. There are at least four decisions that need to get signed and filed with the town clerk. And then they probably need to, solidify their financing and do construction drawings and get building permits from the building commissioner. And so they're, in my opinion, a long way from constructing anything there. But in any event, I don't think that the preliminary subdivision plan application necessarily relates to that topic, or it doesn't directly relate to that topic, other than to say that if they proceed with their preliminary subdivision plan, they may get some protection from zoning amendments that have been passed. And I think that, so that's probably in the back of their minds right now. But it certainly is something that can kind of go parallel with whatever's going on with the planning board right now. And I don't imagine they're going to be building anything anytime soon.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments about this? Otherwise, we will do a roll call for continuing this public hearing. We will need a date certain, I believe, Chris. And what date did they request again?
They have requested December 1st, and that is a regular planning board night. So that's a good night to continue to. And you could say 6:35 on December 1st.
All right. All right. So we need a motion to continue this public hearing to December 1st at 6:35. I'm seeing Janet's hand. Is that, you are making that motion?
I so move.
Thank you. Anybody want a second?
Second.
Johanna, I see your hand.
I'll second.
Thank you. All right. Any discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call again. Maria?
Approve.
Thank you. Janet?
Approve.
Jack?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Johanna?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. So that's 6 in favor and 1 absent. All right, that's the end of that item on the agenda. We'll move to the 4th item on the agenda, which is a new public hearing. All right, believe I have a preamble to read for that. Yes, okay. So the time is 6:59, and in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, this public hearing has been duly advertised, and notice thereof has been posted and is being held for the purpose of providing the opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding SPR 2022-04, Town of Amherst, Podick and Cole Conservation Areas, Route 116. Request site plan review approval under Section 3.335, or Sections 3.335, 7.9, and 8.5 of the zoning bylaw to construct a new 13-space parking area, including 2 accessible spaces and adjacent loading zones, and to install appropriate signage for access to the Podick and Cole Conservation Areas, Map 2C, Parcel 1, R-O zoning district. Is there any board disclosure for this hearing? I see none. All right, who do we have presenting this topic, Chris? I see Rob's hand. Rob, maybe you'll do the presentation?
Yes, Rob Moore, Building Commissioner. Pam, please, if you can go ahead and put up the slides, that'd be great. This is another project by the Conservation Department in the continued effort to improve both visibility and safety at the parking at conservation areas and trail access points. If you can go to the, there we go. So here's a Locust Plan. This particular location in North Amherst is right around the intersection of Sunderland Road and Route 116. There's approximately 120 acres of town land abutting Hadley Conservation Land.
Recording stopped.
Containing both the Podick and Cole.
I'm sorry, Rob.
Yes.
I need to interrupt you for a second. Pam?
Yes.
I heard that the recording just stopped.
Oh, does anybody see? I'm going to stop my screen share a minute because I can't see. Recording paused. Isn't that interesting? Okay, hold on 1
Recording in
second.
progress.
All right, so the recording resumed. I clicked, I suppose it's possible I clicked recording paused, but.
Well, I'm glad that you caught it.
Okay, so
I'm going to go back to sharing my screen.
okay, thank you.
Wait a minute. Whoops.
And Rob, I'm sorry to have interrupted you.
Yep, no problem.
Hold on, Rob. Here we are.
Okay, so here's the property again, about 120 acres of town conservation land, budding Hadley conservation land, including both the Podic and Cole conservation areas and trails. Next slide, please, Pam.
Yes.
Here on the left top corner, zoomed in location plan, the red is where we are going to propose the parking area. The gray shown there off perpendicular 116 is an existing gravel road that goes into the property, turns to the south where the red block is, and continues into the property in a very informal gravel road path. That is seen better on the lower image. I'm not sure if Cam, if you're able to zoom in a little bit on that, but that's the existing conditions down on the bottom left corner. Just a paved apron that ends and turns into a sandy gravel 12-foot wide driveway access. Straight ahead to the right there where the field, where you can see the field and those wooden planks, that's where the parking is going to be proposed for anyone who was out on a site visit. So moving right into the center, our proposed parking plan. The hatched area down the middle is the existing sandy gravel driveway. We're looking to widen that to about 18 feet wide and install 13 parking spaces with 2 accessible marked spaces in the associated loading zone to the side of those spaces, space 1 and space 13. This is a shared parking for 2 conservation areas, so there will be, the idea is that you'd either go one or the other direction, or perhaps both, but that's why we separated the accessible spaces. And you'll see there's a kiosk located at each of the north and south points of the parking lot that'll provide some information about the conservation area and directional materials for the trail access. This is, for anyone that remembers the last application out on Bay Road or has seen that project, this is a gravel parking area. It'll be completed with trap rock gravel, TRG. There's an image of the completed Sweet Owl's parking on Bay Road. So it's a hard packed material. It gets rolled, compacted tightly, and then the finer materials used for the parking area and access to the kiosks if necessary. We did some experimenting with striping, although I've asked for the waiver again, as I did on this lot on Bay Road. We did some experimenting with painting. It worked okay. It lasts about 3 weeks before it needs to be redone. It was well received, I'd say. So we ended up going out and painting again. So I think we're going to, try to make that part of our regular program, our routine to every 3-4 weeks go around and spray the lines again because it seemed to be worth that effort. This parking lot and another parking lot on Stanley Street that we improved, I've seen the parking work really well and in the layout and design that we were hoping for. So we can go back to the plan, Pam, please.
Okay.
There's a couple of signs. There's a kiosk, that's very typical kiosk. The Conservation Department uses at all their conservation areas. So there'll be 2 of those. That's in the top right corner. 2 of those will be installed. And then lower down beneath that is a image of a typical wood post and that'll support a hanging sign, which will be more like the image on the very bottom. They're still finalizing the size and color of these signs, but we're pretty sure they're going to be something like this bottom image, although none of them have been installed yet. So this is gravel parking lot, 13 spaces. We are hoping to get this installed this late this fall before the weather changes. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Rob. The next item would be, do we have a site visit report? Chris, do you want to say something?
We don't have a written site visit report, so maybe one of the planning board members who was at the site visit could report. And there's only one here.
So since I'm the only one that was present, I did meet Chris and Andrew McDougall at the site yesterday about 5:15. If you look at that photo in the lower left that's shown at the moment, we parked behind that photo, behind the photographer of that photo. But then we walked down that road, and the light colored area that's kind of to the right of the gravel road is an area of wooden mats. And that, at least Chris described that as being kind of where the parking would start. And then it would proceed a little farther into the distance. We didn't have a long site visit. We did talk about how bright the sunlight was because it was pretty late in the afternoon, and none of us could really look to the west without being blinded. We did note that the road continues farther onto private property and off of this conservation land. And there was a walking path at the end of that road that headed south. Chris, do you think I missed anything from our conversation?
I do not think so. No.
Okay. Yeah, it was a pretty short conversation. All right. So questions from the board. Tom.
Sure. I just wanted to comment that the design review board had looked at this and approved it with the same, as long as it matched the existing conditions or the planned conditions for Sweet Alice in terms of the road sign, which is not currently there yet, which we heard was under construction. But as long as it met those criteria, that this was approved by the design review board unanimously.
Great. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board? Janet?
This is somewhat related. How often do trails in our conservation area get cut? Because my sons during the pandemic went down the Podex side and it was really nice, but they came back with and the dogs came back with 6 million ticks. And I just wondered, is it once a year or twice a year? Or is it more often? I've always wondered this. Are they on a regular schedule?
Thank you. Rob, do you have an answer to that?
I don't know the intervals. I do know we have, two full-time staff that are dedicated to maintenance of all the conservation areas, not just the trails. But I'm not sure if it's more than once a year. I'd be surprised if it was.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions from the board? All right, Rob, I had one question, which was what are you using for doing the striping that you might be doing once a month for years to come? And would we have an accumulation of vinyl latex on the property because of the white paint that's getting applied repeatedly?
Yeah, it's an aerosol spray, upright spray can that runs in a cart. So it barely covers the stone, as you can imagine. It does more blowing around than anything else, but we've been able to get it to at least be visible. We talked to companies that provide the various types of striping for parking areas or pavement, and because of the high pressure that's involved, it wouldn't leave a visible print at all. So it takes, for that Sweet Alice Park, it took 2 spray cans to, if that helps you with that question, to paint the parking area.
So far as you know, there's no concern about accumulation of that product on the parking lot?
No.
And would you be doing it once a month all year round, or just during the summer season or something?
We'll just be doing it during the peak seasons.
I see. Okay, all right. Is there any further questions from the board? I don't see any. Okay, Johanna?
Good. I guess I also have a question about the striping, because initially the thinking was if we paint the parking lots and get people habituated and using kind of the pattern that the town had intended, that we would be able to abandon that. Rob, can you just expand a little bit more into the experience at Sweet Alice and what is making you think that it's worth both, like, I don't know, I guess I'm thinking like the town's precious staff resources to go and, sounds like now we would be spraying 3 parking lots monthly at Sweet Alice and Stanley Street and at this site. And I don't know if there are additional parking lot improvements in place, but it seems, I don't know, seems like a lot of labor to maintain, I guess.
Yeah, so you're exactly right, Johanna, that the plan was to use the markings to try to get some consistency in the parking and hope that we wouldn't have to continue it. That's why I've asked for the waivers, because long-term, I don't think it's going to continue. But when we put it down on Sweet Alice, it was, like I said, it was well received. It was asked for again. There was an event at the Kestrel property, and we went out and sprayed it again. It takes about, I'd say, 8 to 10 minutes to respray, after we've done the initial marking and have the layout. It's really quick, 2 cans of spray paint. I don't think we'll be doing it forever, but we'll probably do it next season and continue till people get used to using these parking areas.
All right, thanks, Rob. Not seeing any more hands from the board. Are there any public comments on this topic regarding this conservation property? All right, I don't see any public comment. All right, in that case, why don't we have a vote? Does anybody want to move that the board approve the site plan review application? Johanna?
I'll move to approve the site plan review application.
All right, and Tom?
I second.
Thank you. Chris, I see your hand.
Oh, just to remind you all to include closing the public hearing and meets the relevant criteria of 11.24. And did you have any conditions that you wanted to impose?
Can you remind us whether we had conditions on the Bay Road property?
I don't have that in front of me, but I think you might have said build according to plan. That's a typical one that you put in.
Okay, can we simply reference the identical conditions of that previous approval?
Yes.
All right. So I'm seeing Johanna, you are nodding in agreement to that clarification of your motion. And Tom's nodding as well. So we will vote to close the public hearing, approve the site plan review application with the same conditions as previously imposed on Bay Road. And I think that covers the motion.
11.24.
Oh, yes, and that we find that it's in conformance with 11.24. All right, are we all set? Roll call. Maria.
Approve.
Thank you. Jack, you're next now.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
Johanna.
Aye.
Janet.
Hi.
Thank you all.
Doug,
Yes.
what is
Oh,
your
yeah,
vote?
I'm an aye too. Thank you, Pam.
Welcome.
Okay, so we have closed that public hearing. That's the fourth item on our agenda. The time is now 7:17 and we will reopen a public hearing that was previously continued to this date. So this is the proposal to modify the zoning for map 14A, parcel 33 on North Prospect Street. To see if the town will vote to amend the official zoning map to change the zoning of map 14A, parcel 33, to add a parking facility overlay district over the underlying existing RG zoning district, and to establish dimensional regulations, standards, and conditions, and to require a parking management, operations, and maintenance plan to include a vacant parcel of land currently used as a parking lot owned by Town of Amherst in the vicinity of North Pleasant Street, North Prospect Street, Coles Lane, and Amity Street, located in the General Residence District. All right. So we've reopened this public hearing. The applicant, Nate, are you making the presentation this evening?
I am. Thanks, Doug.
All right, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So this is a continuation of the hearing. I'll share my screen. And, just to let the planning board know and everyone else know, the CRC, the Community Resource Committee, is taking this up next week. And, we're presenting here tonight to ask the planning board to either recommend this or, have a further discussion. And then if no recommendation tonight, then, we can schedule a time soon to continue the discussion. And so here's the existing conditions of the property. This was discussed last time. It's about 0.68 acres. It's now 97% covered with pavement as a surface lot. There's approximately 75 parking spaces, and there's very little setbacks except for the front off North Prospect Street. And for this evening, we presented the zoning district as it would appear as a formal amendment. So last time we were here, it was in text form, but not as a bylaw, a formal amendment. So there haven't been significant changes. I was going to make some clarifications. So as an overlay district, is the Word document visible for everyone?
Yes, it is. I can see
so
it.
this would, thanks, Doug. This would change Article 2, zoning districts and use regulations, Article 3. And so within Article 2, we have a listing of special districts. And so this would become, Section 2.04 as the parking facility district. And it would be described as an overlay district that applies only to the municipal lot 14A-33. So that's one section of the bylaw that would be amended. And then Article 3, the use regulations. There had been a section 3.23 that was omitted, and it's a vacant section. So this parking facility district would then occupy this section. And it would have a number of sections here: a purpose to allow the development of a public or private parking facility. It would only apply to this property. It's an overlay district, so it's the underlying zoning, the general residence, doesn't change, and that would regulate all other uses other than a parking facility. And the overlay really does apply just to two sections of the use chart. So 3.3840, which is a commercial parking lot or garage, and 3.3841, which is a public parking lot or garage. There's its own dimensional standards, which would replace section 6.17 and table 3. So there's no minimum lot area if a parking facility was chosen. No frontage. The frontage zone we're defining as 15 feet between the property line along the right-of-way and the closest point to any structure or parking space. Side or rear setbacks, it's 5 feet from the property line abutting a residential use in a residential district. Otherwise, no setback is required. a maximum building coverage of 90%, maximum lot coverage of 95%, and a maximum height of 40 feet, measured as the vertical distance from the average finished grade on the street side of the structure, which is typically how we define where the starting point is. And we're saying to the highest point of the parking structure, including a parapet wall or a screen that's on top of the uppermost parking level. And the height does not apply to stairs, elevator towers, or mechanical equipment. And there has been some comments about this, and I just wanted to add a clarification. Previously, I said that there's 7 or 8 feet to a parking garage. That's headroom height, that's floor to ceiling. And then there's the structure itself that may have 2 or 3 feet of material to support the decks. And then given, a 1% or 1.5% slope to a parking garage and a few hundred feet, that's another few feet. So typically a parking structure doesn't have a level floor, and it's really 10 to 12 feet per deck level. So, for staff, 40 feet measured in this way really applies to, helps measure the height of a parking structure. The way we measure height in the bylaw now couldn't really apply to a parking garage, closely enough. So 40 feet is something we felt, is compatible with the district, the surrounding neighborhood, and it sets a height that, an applicant would have to meet, right? So they could figure out how to shape the parking levels and everything to meet that height. And so none of this has changed from the previous presentation. Staff does not think we have to have a setback. In many properties, there are no setbacks from property lines. In the BG, it's not required. And so we think that this is still appropriate for this overlay. And even given the maximum lot coverage of 95%, it's still slightly less than the existing condition. In terms of standards and conditions, the permit granting authority would still be a site plan review application. The design review principles would need to be applied, would be required to be applied. The design standards and landscape standards of section 7.1 of the zoning bylaw would be applied, and then the site plan review criteria. These conditions are relatively the same. So, we would, we're saying here that the permit granting authority could ask the applicant to provide studies at their cost and peer review of traffic impact analysis. And so, right now we don't know what size garage, the number of parking spaces that could be proposed. And so that's up to an applicant. And so then it's on their, it's their responsibility to show how they can mitigate for that and the impacts that could have. We still have the parking structure shall be designed to be compatible with the adjacent neighborhood and downtown. The parking structure shall be designed and/or facade treatments shall be applied to minimize the visibility of cars parked inside the facility from North Prospect Street. And so, these two, and the next one, architectural details and materials shall be used to break down the scale of the parking structure facade. So the 3 conditions here are really meant to guide the permit granting authority during an application review. So, there's been comments about having a solid wall on North Prospect Street. The stair tower should be away from the street. And so as an overlay zone, we're not getting that prescriptive in terms of design guidelines. That's something that the planning board could ask during permitting. You could ask the applicant to have an alternative site plan that has the stair tower away from the street. You could ask them to show different types of facade material. Typically a garage is not a solid wall because then the venting required in it is really extensive and expensive. And so it could be that the planning board or the permit granting authority asks that, all the parking decks have a 4-foot wall, a solid wall up to a certain height to block headlights when they're inside the garage. But staff believes all that could be discussed during permitting and doesn't need to be written into the overlay. There's still the section 3.2344 that discusses the grade of the entry drive. It has width and really, E says at least one vehicle shall queue on the property without blocking the sidewalk. That's something that was in there. It's something that we think, will help at least get cars out of the public way. The frontage zone shall be heavily landscaped with plants, having a height of at least 1 story above grade at the time of planting. And this has been changed right here, in addition to other low-level plantings and ground cover. And so, that's an addition from the last time, just to help clarify the types of plants. I did notice actually that sustainable design objectives should be called out as its own standard, so that has to be renumbered. Again, we're not saying exactly what that means. It's something that could be discussed in terms of, is it, how the materials they're using, is it their site design? We want to allow some flexibility here without knowing what the future could be. This could also mean electrical vehicle charging stations. It could mean more bike racks to allow different modes of transportation. And so without, being overly prescriptive, this is something that can guide the permitting. Again, the continuous sidewalks, we're not asking an applicant to bring sidewalks outside the site, but make connections to existing pathways and walkways along North Prospect Street. Lighting should be installed and downlit to prevent disbursement onto adjacent properties. And we did qualify the freestanding sign. So we're still allowing additional freestanding or projecting signs that do not exceed 50 square feet each for a combined total of 100 square feet, may be installed in accordance with Article 8. So, previously we didn't have this 50 square feet. So we're limiting a sign to 50 square feet. And again, this is something that can be discussed during permitting. And then we're requiring a parking management operations and maintenance plan. And this would be submitted at the time of application. It would include the number of parking spaces and the intended users, rates and fees, hours of operation, safety measures such as lighting or security cameras, signs, enforcement operations such as ticketing or towing, trash removal, snow management, treatment and maintenance of interior surfaces, and stormwater management. This isn't an exhaustive list, but it's, again, meant to guide an applicant in the review during permitting. And so, this is one step to have an overlay to allow the possibility of a parking facility on this property. If this were to move forward, the town would then need to issue a request for proposals. And so some of the comments we've received in terms of specific elements of the project could be required in the request for proposals as part of a long-term lease or other conditions of the property. But staff doesn't necessarily think they're appropriate in the zoning overlay. So, there could be certain elements in terms of a ratio of bike racks to parking spaces or certain sign elements that would go in a request for a proposal, but is not really necessary in the overlay zoning amendment.
All right. Nate, is that the end of it?
That's the end of it.
Okay. So why don't we get started with the discussion? I will say that I guess, Chris, am I right that the CRC will have a hearing on this October 26th? Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
It's in the afternoon. So it's 2:00 in the afternoon or sometime around then for people who might want to come from the public.
Thank you. So it probably would be a good idea for us to vote on this this evening, up or down, at least, whether we want to recommend or not recommend at this time.
That's correct.
So let's try to keep that as a goal for the discussion. And do we have a board conversation about this? Anybody want to speak to or ask questions of Nate? Janet, I see your hand.
Thank you. And thank you, Nate, for this presentation. Has there been any massing study done for this parking garage, its potential build out? I know the planning department has done that in response to requests from the planning boards for several zoning amendments this year. And I think it would be really helpful for us to see what this building would look like in relationship to the buildings around it, just to see how big it is or how small it is, that kind of thing. And so I had asked for that in an email. Has that been done?
Chris or Nate, have you got any comments about that?
That has not been done, no. But we did show an image of the garage from Greenfield and gave a sense of, how big a garage might be on this property. But we're not designing a garage now, so we didn't think that it was necessary to provide a three-dimensional massing study.
Okay. Nate, did you want to say anything?
No, I was going to just mention that the Greenfield garage is something we had shown previously in terms of a potential massing.
Okay. All right. So we don't have that information for this evening's conversation.
Right.
Janet, did you raise your physical hand?
Yeah, I have several questions. So we have done a massing study for the B overlay zone. We've had several of those for the 40B, for footnote M, and moving the BL into footnote B. And all of those were super helpful to the planning board because we got to see what the consequences of a zoning change were. And so I think we need that before we can make a recommendation. I think the CRC could benefit from it. And then I also think that members of the public and the town councilors would benefit from that. So it seems odd to me to go forward without at least a simple massing study, comparing the size of the parking garage in relationship to St. Bridges, the CVS, the houses across the street, it seems, and Strong House and the library. So we do that all the time.
Okay, thank you. Maria.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Nate. It's nice to see it all sort of organized and distilled. It looks good. Looks just like what you just showed us previously. The comment about a lot of people asking for studies and why we've done many studies in the past. I keep wanting to say it, but I haven't had an opportunity. So all those massing studies done previously by town staff were because we were studying a lot of different parcels in a lot of different zones of a lot of different neighborhoods. And it was necessary to just kind of get a sense of like what happens on the largest parcels, what might happen on a few typical parcels, because, no private developer or no one on the planning board can come and do that except for, town staff who have that sort of ability and resources. What this amendment doing is literally asking for that for the next step. It's literally saying, please provide us with studies, with traffic studies, with all these, options for what could be there. That's literally the next step. So when we were studying all those other kind of footnote M's and apartments and things, that was because it was of a sort of town-wide sort of amendment. It was something that no one else was going to do except town staff. This amendment is literally asking for that study from potential developers and for the RFP. So to ask the town staff to use their energy, time, and focus on that next step doesn't make sense, especially when we have a lot of other zoning amendments that need a lot of research and work. So this is sort of a pathway to that next step that a lot of people have been emailing asking for. And I guess I'll just keep saying, we aren't, the zoning doesn't design buildings or design for specific, I guess it doesn't provide exact answers. It's to, like Nate was saying, it's to provide a guide. It's to provide a sort of pathway for potential projects. So I guess, I feel like we're having the same conversation every week, but that's why we aren't supposed to be thinking through at this fine level of detail. I really feel like this is a guide. It's a stepping stone. It's not the answer. So, I hear all the people asking for that, but I think that's the wrong use of resources of our town staff and planners and building department to be designing a building that this is literally asking the next step to be that. So from someone else.
Thank you, Maria. Jack, do you still want to comment?
Yes, excuse me. I would like to say ditto, ditto, ditto to Maria's comments. She covers so much. I can't even like follow up that. She hit all the points. So yes. So I have no other comments.
Okay, so I guess thus far what I'm hearing is that some members feel we have enough information to vote on this and to recommend it, and that some members do not think we have enough information yet. Are there other comments from the board? Janet, I'm going to wait for you. I want to hear from Tom and Johanna first. So Tom?
Sure. Thanks, Doug. I'll follow up and just say that I appreciate seeing it in this format. I think really detailed, Nate, and outlined. I think that the notion that we're making that the zoning is coming with standards and conditions and that they're relatively detailed in terms of the expectations for the next step, I think is really important. So I think that's a really helpful way for us to move forward without getting into the weeds of what this is going to look like or how it's going to exactly operate, because I feel like that's what comes next. But I appreciate the level of detail in this, and I think it's ready for a vote.
All right, thank you. And Johanna?
Yeah, similar to what Tom said, I just based on all the work we've done on this, I'm definitely leaning towards this being the best site to explore for a parking garage in town as opposed to other places. I really appreciate the overlay and the constraints that are put on it and the kind of guidelines that are going to be put out there in the RFP. I personally am not yet convinced that a parking garage is necessary, but I'm interested in seeing kind of what this, kind of public-private partnership, whether the market supports it. So I too would be comfortable, moving ahead and voting on it tonight.
Okay. And Janet, but after you, Janet, I think I'll go to public comment.
Okay, so I have a few things to talk about, so I don't want to have those lost. And so I'd like some time. The other question, I had another question. We had last meeting, we had talked about traffic impacts on the different streets, and Andrew had raised that issue, and I had sort of expected that some information would come back on potential impacts on North Pleasant Street, North Prospect, Coles, Amity Street, maybe the need for turning lanes and things like that. And so I don't know, I don't think this is excessively detailed questions. I think these are kind of normal questions. I know that when I was in town meeting, we often got a massing study. I think the town council will want to see it. These questions will come up in town council. It's kind of what we should be asking about. So has any of that been done? Have any more thought about impacts on the roads or where the best places would be to exit or exit? Does the town have access or a right to use the CVS exit and there are a lot to get out that we're doing right now? Is it just habit?
Okay, so Chris, I see your hand.
We really think that those are things that are going to be addressed during the design process, and that allowing something to be considered on this property doesn't mean that we have to have all the answers in hand and answers about traffic impact, et cetera. We'd probably need to hire a traffic engineer to do that. And if we wanted to talk about turning lanes and all of those types of things, that would cost the town a lot of money to figure that out all in advance. And those things will be figured out when there is a proposal. So at this stage of just opening the door to allow the possibility of a parking garage to be built here, we wouldn't expect to have that information.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay,
you have another question, Janet?
Yeah, so we had also talked about setbacks, like side and rear setbacks. In the BG, the side setbacks are 10 feet, of course, with nefarious footnote A. And then the rear setbacks are also, I'm having a little problem here. Yeah, so the front setbacks is 0 to 20, and then the rear setbacks are 10. And so one question I really, and I feel really strongly about this because I own a property with a building right on the property line, and I have a part of the garage is on a property line. Has anyone told CVS owners that this proposal could be building a building right up to the property line and also taking away the spaces that they're currently using for their customers for free? Has that conversation taken place with St. Bridget's, and what was their reaction? Because, you know, I don't know that they've actually seen this and understand what's happening.
Thank you, Janet. Chris?
So I don't know what conversations the proponents of the original zoning amendment had with St. Bridget's and CVS. We have sent notifications to everybody within 300 feet of this property for the public hearing that's going to be held next week by the CRC. So they will have an opportunity at that time to comment, and that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Have they seen the drawings or just the notification?
Well, they're certainly aware of these hearings, and so if they want to participate in the hearings, they'll see the drawings.
Okay.
So, another question, Janet?
Actually, not a question. I sent out an email with 10 additional requirements that I think should be added to the PFOD, the Parking Facilities Overlay District. And so I'd like to make a motion that we add those to it and then discuss them. And I can give my reasons why, because I was looking for like a way forward and trying to reverse trying to take concerns and considerations in advance and shape this proposal or the zoning amendment so it's stronger, it's more clear, it provides reassurances to abutters and residents. And so my goal was to find the middle ground. I am very concerned that this property, this parking lot is too small for a parking garage. You know, the study the last study that was done about it gave kind of mixed reviews based on a parking garage on the CVS lot plus the town lot, and basically said, it picked that as the best of the 3 spots it looked at, the Bang Center and also the Amity Street lot. It said that financially it didn't look like a big money maker. It suggested going for state grant money, and that long-term parking would be a better source of income than short-term parking. And since the purpose of this lot is to provide destination parking for people coming in and out of Amherst, I think that, so I'm just trying to figure out how to get support from the neighbors, make them feel reassured, and actually to be flexible. Like maybe the Amity Street lot plus Bank of America is a better spot. Developers can look at both of the overlays and pick which one they want to do, competition and things like that. So I'd like to make a motion to add the 10 additional requirements listed in my document for the Parking Facilities Overlay District. I'd love a second so we can just kind of go through them and discuss them. Thank you.
Do we have a second? Jack, I'm seeing your hand. Jack, seconds. You are muted. Jack, you're still muted.
I am so out of practice being non-chairman. Sorry. But I would like to hear the points, and that's why I'm seconding.
Okay, thank you. Pam, do you have that memo from Janet available to show on the screen?
Missing mine. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, can you,
That's the wrong one. Hold on.
Okay.
I get all confused trying to find the Word documents. Where's the packet? The sketch, the downloads.
It's not in the packet. I sent it to attach to an email.
I think Nate may have it.
Oh, I have it, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you.
There it is.
Yeah, I was sharing my screen. I don't know if that's from me, Pam, or from you, but as if this is visible to everyone.
It is yours, but I did find it.
okay, Nate, I guess you get to drive for a while.
Sure. So this is, this was sent in an email today. So the first
Janet,
condition is,
do you want to speak to this, or do you want Nate to continue?
I'm not sure what Nate's talking. I mean, is he? I'd love to speak to my guidelines, but Nate, did you have something to say too?
oh no, I was just going to go read through them. I was going to go number one, but if you want to do that, you can as well. Yeah.
Okay, I'd prefer to do it, and I'll try to speak slowly. The first addition or condition would be to limit the total height to 40 feet, including the mechanicals and solar panels. This was to alleviate concerns that the building would just get bigger and bigger. And, that if we all love solar panels, and it would be a great thing to put over the roof deck parking, but that could push up another 8 or 10 feet. And suddenly we're at BG height or 50 feet or more. And so that was just to give reassurance that this building is not going to be big, not to be anti-solar, but to reduce the mass and size of the building to the height of the adjoining RG district. The elevator tower, could obviously needs to go above the roof deck. One of the criteria, so that would be the elevator tower could be taller, but it would be opposite the residences. Because I was just picturing, I've lived in a city, and it's like if you were living next to a parking garage with an elevator going up and down all night long, doors opening and closing, and people talking. Put that over towards North Pleasant Street. Give the people on Prospect Street or South or North Prospect Street, if this was an Amity Street, a rest. So that was number one, and I just wonder what people thought of that one.
Why don't you go? I think I'd like you to go through them all, and then we'll see whether there's interest in pursuing any in particular.
Okay, and by the way, thank you, Jack, for seconding. The second one is to include in the parking overlay district the CVS lot, the town lot on Amity Street, and the adjoining Bank of America and People's Bank parking lots. I might throw in the lot owned by Barry Roberts next to the CVS also. And here's the idea is, I just think, if we're going to build the parking garage, let's just build one. And let's make sure it's economically viable. I don't see that this small parking garage, it may not be viable, but we have all these parking lots next to it. Why not just include them into it? Or just the option to. So this doesn't say, no, you can't build on the town lot. It just tells to any developer you can add to it. And then it also offers the Amity Street lot, the Bank of America lot, and the People's Bank lot. A developer could say, I'd like to use Amity Street. It's really central. It's, whatever. And then they could talk to Bank of America and see if they can cut a deal. Maybe they'll buy the lot, or the People's Bank lot, and they'll share it. And so it just gives flexibility about the options. It's kind of the American way. It's not saying no to anything, but it's just opening up the possibilities. We don't have any kind of analysis of whether this is the best spot or the good spot or not. And so let's let the developers have the flexibility to do that. So that's number 2. Number 3 is requiring a solid building facade on any parking garage that fronts homes on North and South Prospect Street. This would not be an incredibly large or expensive wall. And I think it probably wouldn't have big costs in terms of ventilation because it's not that wide. I think it's like 110 feet on South Prospect Street, maybe a little longer. And I just think, again, anybody living in an old Victorian house doesn't want to be hearing people coming out of the Drake at 12 o'clock or 1 in the morning, doing their alarms to get the cars open, the strange sound that my hybrid vehicle makes when it backs up, lights, people shouting, door slamming. And so that, I think, just gives protection to the neighborhood that they can sleep at night and have the parking garage be a good neighbor.
Okay, Nate, can you scroll down?
Thank you. Number 4 is required that the solid exterior facade along North and South Prospect Street and Amity Street reflect the character of the 19th century buildings adjoining and across the street. The local historic district, whose name the Prospect Gaylord Historic District. And again, this is to make the parking garage an add to the downtown. This is probably everybody's sort of favorite part of town, all the old buildings, and just to make sure it fits in. And there's lots of examples of this, and it doesn't have to be a solid wall on Amity Street. But, I just Googled it, and there's lots of people building really attractive parking garages. I opted for a more historic fit because pretty much every building, including the People's Bank, is going in a traditional style there, and it kind of keeps it going. There are some very wild modern examples that are sort of interesting, but I think this would, again, gain support for people if they felt like what goes in is attractive and fits in. And there is an option also on the Amity Street to put small stores along the front, which an example I sent around. Number 5 would be exiting cars only onto the main arteries of North Pleasant and Amity Street. Again, nobody wants to have lights coming, 35, 40 cars leaving at 11 o'clock at night when a show is over or the cinema is out. It just makes sense to me not to inflict that on people. And I don't think it's much of a burden for the garage because there's already a way to get into it from North Pleasant or from Amity Street. Let's see. Number 6 is require a year-round evergreen vegetative screen to cover the building walls, maybe not the whole amount, but the walls that are facing residences. And that may include deciduous plantings. That kind of speaks for itself. Number 7 is side and rear setbacks of 10 feet. I just think I really want to speak strongly against having side setbacks where people can build up to a property line. And I think it puts a burden on the use of people abutting property owners. Like, they're very limited in what they can do. If you want to fix your parking garage, you're standing on their property. If you want to put a building in, you're constructing under a very tight envelope. I lived this experience and I can't tell you how negative it is. And I don't think we should inflict it onto onto St. Bridget's or, anybody, People's Bank or whoever is, abutting.
Nate, can you scroll down?
Thank you. Let's see. Number 8 is required that 50% of the parking spaces are available for short-term use until 10 o'clock at night. That just sort of speaks for itself. The purpose of this garage is not long-term parking or can be used for it, but during the day, our goal is Destination Amherst to get people in and out, to know there's parking spaces, to help the local businesses. And so the fear that people have expressed to me or in this meeting is that it's just going to be long-term parking for, our expensive apartments that are coming in downtown. This doesn't say no to it, but make sure there's space there. Number 9, I would say we should do this by special permit by the ZBA and not site plan review by the planning board. This is going to be a controversial project, and the ZBA can take a fine-tooth comb to it and make sure it fits in and looks good. The special permit, it has more criteria and it's more clear, and also some more control by the board to kind of move things around. And so I would just advocate for that. And we have special permits for all sorts of buildings. I think this one, to give everybody reassurances that there's a little bit more of a harder look, a little more thorough look. And then finally, to avoid excessive, number 10, to avoid excessive curb cuts, requirement that easements be secured to cross existing car exits and entrances. I think, this one's a little heavy-handed, but I just thought we don't want like more and more curb cuts on South Prospect Street or North Prospect Street, or, it's just, let's consolidate them. There's already a system of sharing, and just make sure it stays.
All right, thank you, Janet. So Jack, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't want to go, item by item, but I think Janet has, there's a handful of very good points. And so, I would move that, the planning department reviews these, and consider revising. And, I don't know, I'm not certain of the expediency of this particular, bylaw, but, open to conversation. But I think there's some very good points here. So that's it.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Chris or Nate, do you have any comment about this? Some of these?
I would rather hear what specifics we want to change, because, my thought is on some of these would be great things to have in a request for a proposal and not specific to zoning in terms of curb cuts or the number of parking spaces available for short-term users. I also think that some of these things are parts of the design and process that would work during permitting. So the planning board has plenty of authority to review the design and shape and massing of a structure, its placement on the site, the curb cuts, the traffic impact, the design of the facility. So, I think all those things can be done through permitting with the permit, with the planning board, not necessarily, and the ZBA, but I don't think the planning board has any less ability to do that. And so for a number of these, it would really be then, what does the planning board think in terms of the direction? So, I think if they, for instance, if number 5 or whatever number the planning board would like, I'd like to hear the direction specifically, because I feel like there's a lot here to consider if it's just left to staff.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Nate.
Mm-hmm.
Tom.
Sure, thanks, Doug. Janet, I really appreciate all of these comments. I tend, in many cases, on this list to agree with Nate in that I feel like a lot of them will belong in an RFP, especially about, the use of parking. Because I do think what we need to address there is your concern about having an actual review of our parking needs. And so to say 50% without actually having any kind of analysis doesn't really make sense. So I think including that in an RFP, or including that they provide an review of our parking requirements downtown, and then having us, give input or feedback about setting those values, I think is a really important thing. I mean, I think, trying to cut down on sound in a parking lot is difficult because there's a parking lot there and people are going to flood out of whatever's there, get in their car, slam the door, honk and chit chat and all that stuff anyway. So I feel like, we're, again, it's a nice thought, but there's already a parking garage there. So if we don't build it, it's still a problem for those particular people. I think the one thing I will say is that for item number 2, about the multiple lots, I feel like the only problem I have with that right now is that we haven't reviewed those, whereas we reviewed this one in great detail. And so I would recommend that if we want to add an overlay district to these other lots, and somebody brings it to us, that we can review that, have a conversation about it, and then approve that. No one's stopping anybody from doing that. It's just that it's been requested that we look at one particular lot, then that, whoever's going to propose the parking garage there will have to determine whether it's feasible there or not. And if it's not, then maybe we do want to consider other locations, and maybe someone should bring forward or propose that we do look at an option for additional parking lots in the area, or parking areas to be approved for an overlay. But again, I don't think it's part of the purview of right now, because we haven't reviewed those things. So I don't feel comfortable adding those in without having that conversation as a group and actually looking at those sites in particular.
Yeah, I mean, this proposal originated with two town councilors who convinced town councilor to refer it to us for these hearings. And, that's all we've really been asked to do at the moment. Maria?
Okay. Yeah, those are really great points. And Janet, a lot of your concerns are exactly the things we need to be thinking about at the next step. But just to be specific about answering what Nate wanted to know, if there were any particular edits, like for example, I don't agree with number 1 or number 7, the sort of changing of the dimensional regulations that Nate had already presented. I think those would just stay as drawn up, in my opinion. That's where I am standing. And then most of the other points are exactly the kinds of things that will come up when we have a design. And those are all really great concerns. I also don't agree with number 9 about changing from SP to SPR. But otherwise, yeah, it's all the kind of deep dive into the sort of questions and research and data that we need to make sure this parking deck works in all of the different ways we've already brought up, as far as financial, traffic, parking, scale, massing, all that. So, yeah, Nate, I would say, kind of, I forget who said, kind of like what Jack was saying, just sort of, review with the staff and just keep a lot of these suggestions and ideas in mind for the RFP stage, but that I wouldn't change anything right now in the bylaw amendment that you proposed.
Thank you. Jack, you are next.
Yeah, I just wanted, I guess I was seeking some conversation amongst the board. And I really thought Tom and Maria, helped me understand, where we're at with this. And, but I'm not really, concerned, the setbacks and, the dimensional things are they should be in line, with, as proposed. But I really would like to see this area kind of expanded. But again, that's another process, as Doug, mentioned. So, but yeah, I appreciate the comments of Maria and Tom.
Thank you, Jack. Johanna.
Thank you very much. I have a question about the potential implications of the first recommendation to include the mechanicals in the 40 feet height. And maybe this is a question for Nate, but like, based on what we know now and other parking garages, perhaps the Greenfield one, how many parking levels would we have in a 40-foot structure? And if we included mechanicals, would it eliminate one of the levels potentially?
Yeah, sure. I think the, the 40 feet as measured from the street, because of the topography of this site, there could be a subterranean level. So, a developer could go, if the developer wants to go, spend their time going underground, so 40 feet, you could say it could be a 5-story garage with 2 stories buried. So 40 feet from the street might be a 3-story with a surface parking on the, on the upper deck. To get solar panels that are, say, if they're, stadium mounted above cars and above, and then with an angle, I mean, that might add another, it could be 12 feet, right? So really, essentially, you're getting down to a, in the 20-foot height for the upper parking deck. I feel like that's just, an estimate in terms of if we're measuring it. Typically, the way the zoning bylaw works, we don't include, solar panels as part of the height and on any building, right? We don't include some of these mechanicals in the height calculation anyways. And so I think for, staff relied on that and, and just trying to come up with what would be a continuous elevation. So, to the height of a parapet wall or screening, that's usually a level, it's level across the garage, right? At least at some point it's a determined height, as opposed to trying to say like, a 3-story level, that's a harder thing to measure because the garage floor moves, right? There's a slope to it. But I think 40 feet, including solar, would greatly reduce the upper height of the upper deck, depending on how the solar is arranged.
So it's reasonable to think that might cost a level of parking.
Right.
Okay, one level. I see Janet's hand. Maybe you can make one more comment and then we'll turn to public comment.
Nate, I have a clarifying question. So if it's 40 feet at the parapet and then there's solar panels overhead, is that 12 feet from the roof deck up? So it's like, and so that would just add more shadow on the, right? But so are you saying like 12 feet from the roof deck surface?
So Janet, one way to think of it would be the first level would be 0 to 12 feet. The second level would be 12 to 24. The third level would be 24 to 36. And you could potentially have a fourth level of parking on the roof.
Yeah.
At that 36 feet above the sidewalk, which couldn't have much of anything on top of it if the 40 feet gets you to the top of the parapet wall of the top level of parking.
So then I guess the question is, under your scenario, you're 36 feet at the roof deck, and then you add 12 feet if you had like a roof of solar panels?
So the 12 feet would be measured from the 36 feet height.
Okay, thank you.
So the total would be something like 48. But, all of these numbers are purely speculative right now.
Well, that's the way the solar panels are measured now if they go on a house, right? If they're stadium mount, they're not part of the height calculation. So you could have a roof 40 feet in the RD district to the midpoint, so the peak could be higher. And then if you have stadium mount or something above the roof, you're adding, height to the roof of a residential structure as well.
All right. So why don't we, let's see, I see we've passed 8 o'clock. Usually we take a break around 8 o'clock. Do people want to take a break, or should we go ahead with public comment on this topic and then break? I'm inclined to go ahead with public comment. I'm seeing Johanna agreeing with that, Jack agreeing with that. Okay, so why don't we go ahead to public comment? And first person I see is Harry Peltz. If you could state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes for comment. Mr. Peltz, are you there?
Hi, Harry.
Please unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right, we can now hear you.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I reside at 32 North Prospect Street, which is directly across from the entrance to that property is directly across from the exit from CBS's lot. My fellow residents are going to be commenting as well. We have a condominium group that houses approximately 18, 20 people as their residences. I have some specific concerns. One, this 40-foot height, this lot slopes down towards CBS. I want to know specifically where this 40-foot height restriction applies. Secondly, I'm concerned that there wasn't more planning, even though you can say, oh, it may cost the town some money to do that and more investigation. You have a 2019 report that has not been updated. I'm also concerned about the fact that this proposal is being pushed by 2 of the town council people who have to stand for election this coming November. And they seem to indicate that there has been some proposal and contract negotiations with a proposed build, there's been very little public access to the process that's gone on. And I believe it impairs the credibility and trust in our town government when so little is given about the actual process that is happening. And it also indicates to me from past experience that possibly there are some agreements between some people that would result in a profit to business people or others in town government as a result of this particular proposal. I'm going to defer to my other fellow residents who have, I know, extended comments. And I ask you the question of traffic and the effect on the historic residential area on the other side of North Prospect Street is going to be an impact which I think will diminish our town greatly. And I ask you to consider that along with everyone else's comments. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Next we have Pam Rooney.
Hi, Pam.
Hi there, Pam Rooney.
Your name and your address.
42 Cottage Street, Pam Rooney. Thanks for letting me speak. One quick question that Nate can answer afterwards, and that is, what is the difference between a frontage zone and a front setback? If he could explain that, that would be great. In the 3.231 section, the applicability, I would agree that it is not just the CVS area lot, but also that should be broadened to include the Amity Street lots, and those would be parcel 14A 216, 14A 330, 14A 217. I have to disagree with a number of you who stated that kind of conversation is outside of your purview. I think very much that the planning board has the responsibility to take something that's handed to you and actually analyze it to understand if there are broader applications for it, or if it's just an absolute single application. So I do appreciate that at least somebody is asking to take that broader look. Let's see. The conversation about the height, I think you're going to hear a lot of this. It's interesting because on the one hand, a 40-foot height in the RG, I think, is typically measured to, it would be to the top of the parapet. But I think it's absolutely a valid question to ask for a massing diagram, because a 40-foot structure on North Prospect Street is a very, very different beast than it would be if it were out in the middle of a parking lot somewhere without a, 2-story or 2.5-story gabled mid-1800s neighborhood next to it. So I think the request for a massing is absolutely appropriate in that setting, and would strongly recommend that you all suggest doing that before it goes to town council. So quick summary, I think the application of this should be broader and not limited to this one lot. I know that was what was handed to you on your lap, but I think you all are the board to deal with this, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Next we have, I believe it's Bob Pam. Please state your name and your address.
Hello, Bob Pam.
Hello. Hi, I'm Bob Pam, 229 Amity Street. I am speaking as an individual, not as an official of any organization. There are three concerns that I guess I would have to address. First one having to do with the library. As you know, that is next door, If that project proceeds, the only access that will be available for doing the construction will be through the town parking lot. And so that is probably means that for the next 3 years at least, one ought not to be thinking about building anything there. That suggests that there is really no time frame on this, which would require action by this board now. Second, again, thinking about the library, we have provided instructions to the architects who've done the work so far that the height of the building ought not to be visible from Amity Street. And I don't know whether, if you think about this building now, whether that is going to be visible. And if so, should we be reconsidering the height restriction we've put on the library? Second concern has to do with CVS. And I will talk about that in two ways. First is that it is the only quasi-grocery store in downtown. It depends to a large degree on its parking lot. The parking lot is a free parking lot. If you put it next to a fee parking lot, what I anticipate will happen is that people will park in the CVS lot at 8 in the morning and will leave at 5 or some such hours, and its access to its own parking lot will be restricted in ways that are simply not appropriate. The third has to do with neighborhood. And of course, if you talk about this as parking for the Drake, which is a bar as well as other things, we're not talking about people leaving at 9. We're not talking about people leaving at 11. We're probably talking about people leaving at 1. And when they leave, they will not necessarily be quiet and orderly. So think about what that means in terms of the neighborhood. The last point has to do with access. And currently, the only way you get into that area is by crossing traffic in most cases on North Pleasant Street. If you then close that for vehicular access and you now put it all onto North Prospect, it is not clear to me how that is going to work for that street and for the neighbors to it on Halleck and other streets nearby. So those are the concerns that I would raise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. And thank you for the clear articulation of your points. It certainly sounded like you may have written those out in advance. That was great. Next, we have Ronnie Parker. Would you please state your name and your address?
Hi, this is Ronnie Parker again, 24 North Prospect Street. Oh my goodness. I am sure that none of you lives anywhere near here, because the idea of a 40-foot building across the street from us, our bedroom is going to be looking into the parking lot. So I really want you to reconsider the height restrictions. Now, many of you have spoken about this in very technical terms. You have to really think about it in human terms. We're going to have a library building that will take down 3 oaks in the back. The very little green that's here will be taken away. So much for a green Amherst. It's really shocking to me the way this discussion is going on. The proposal did originate with 2 town councilors, but they're not here for the discussion. They have never explained why they said 3 levels and now they're saying 5. They've literally lied to us when they said, trust us. I heard that myself. And I thought, well, of course, these are people who are representing us. So I would charge you to really think about what it's like to be in the place of those of us, because that's your job. You're the planning board for the town of Amherst. You're not talking about your own home. Think about what it's like. Come and walk around here and see what it's like. Somebody said, oh, there's already a parking lot there and there's noise and there are people banging their cars at night. So this is just more of the same. No, it is not. That parking lot is hardly used. It is never full. We never hear noise from there. So hang out here, see what it's like, see what our reality is like before you make these decisions. The second thing that I really have noticed here that's bothersome to me is that the town officials are supposed to respond to us and to you. They're supposed to provide information. So personally, I don't think it matters that Mr. Malloy, I have nothing against you and I want your technical expertise here. But I don't think it matters that you agree or disagree because you're not the designated authority. You're the technical expert. It does matter what the members of the planning board think. And I am sort of surprised from my previous experience with local government that there's so much of a blend here. So since my time is running out again, I would say, please pay attention to height. Think about a tower in front of your bedroom. Do you want that? That's what you're relegating us to. And pay attention to the setbacks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Next hand I see is from Dorothy Pam. Name and address, please.
Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, Dorothy Pam, 229 Amity Street. And I'm speaking in my private capacity. I don't care for the logic that says the town doesn't want to spend its own money on a traffic study and you want a private person to do so. That puts the private person in the driver's seat. I cannot believe that if a traffic study were done, honestly, that this lot would pass. The street, North Prospect Street, is too small, too narrow, and it would not work. I've also seen somebody's study that discussed all the on-street parking spots that would have to disappear in order to make North Prospect Street safe as an entrance and exit street for the parking garage, so that you are actually cutting into parking that we already have. So right now, you're saying the town does not want to spend the money on a traffic study, yet nobody seems to care that the owners of the property across the street from it will be losing the enjoyment of their homes. They will absolutely have their quality of life changed and made much more negative. There was a moment today when the height was discussed as being a normal BG height, but I remember that this lot is now zoned at RG. It's zoned RG. It's right next to a historic block. It took years and years and years for that block to develop, for those houses to be built. And unless you feel like you want to just, erase Amherst history and get rid of the beauty that is here in order to make a convenience for some people who are sure that this parking spot will really work, even though, as has been testified again and again, that the lot is not used very well, and that you want the town to forego, if the town is short on money, it will forego the $50,000 or $30,000 to $50,000 it gets right now a year on parking revenue. So I am really, really upset that this has continued to be discussed in this way, kind of like, well, we don't know, we can't tell. We'll just let some private money person come in and do the studies to see if this is really a suitable spot. So I totally support Janet's position of investigating the Amity Street parking lot, which is in fact in the center of the town, in the center of all the places that need parking right now. We're talking, of course, about parking for shopping and for entertainment. We're not talking about us devoting our time and energy to provide parking for private developers who chose not to provide parking in their apartments, because that would be a total disgrace. So I just feel that this is being pushed, it's being rushed, and I don't see the point of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. Chris, I see your hand. Is there something you want to respond to at this time, or shall we wait until the public finishes?
I wanted to respond to the comment about not wanting to do a traffic study. A traffic study is necessary eventually, but right now nobody has appropriated money for a traffic study. So there is no money for a traffic study. Town council could make that choice to do a traffic study if it thinks that that's necessary, and town council has the ability to appropriate money, but the planning department and the planning board don't have that ability. So if people think that that's a necessary component to make this decision, then so be it. But it's not something that I can say yay or nay to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Pam, could you, yeah, thanks, reset the clock. Okay, next hand I see is from Jennifer Taub. Name and address.
Hi, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. I didn't have an unmute button. Jennifer Taub, 259 Lincoln Avenue. I haven't written my comments in advance as Bob Pam did because I'm responding to a couple of comments that were made during the planning board's discussion. If I heard correctly, did at least one planning board member said voiced a specific objection to having a special permit, but to keep the site plan review? And I think what the residents in the surrounding neighborhood are really feeling is that the planning board just doesn't care how we are affected by this. Would it really be too much to give us, the extra care of a special permit instead of a site plan review? So I would ask that. When I think the way we got to this overlay district instead of rezoning, one of the concerns, where we were promised that the parking structure, we were promised this by the sponsors of the zoning bylaw amendment, would not exceed 3 stories. And that when I first, when the proposal was made, instead of rezoning from RG to BG, but to have the overlay, it did seem like a response to our concerns about not permanently changing the zoning until we knew whether a parking structure could actually go there. But but the overlay now has parameters where the building could be higher than it was when it was first presented by the sponsors of the amendment for rezoning. So I also share the concern. I don't know how we got from 3 stories to 48 feet. And in terms of, I guess also as an aside with the library, the new wing of the library is going to have large windows looking north. And is it going to face, what seems like it could almost be the height of a 5-story building? And then I did want to reiterate in response to the comment that it's already noisy. There virtually no one parks in the lot now. So it's not noisy, especially in the evening, it's empty. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. The next commenter is Kitty Exelson Berry. Please state your name and your address.
Kitty, am I on? Yes. Kitty Exelson Berry at 89 Stony Hill Road. That's in Echo Hill South. I agree with Johanna Newman's statement that she's not really sure that a parking facility is needed. And Johanna, I think you said you would be willing to, go along with it, but that really there's a lack of information about whether it's actually needed. There were 2 studies recently done of parking. One was just in 2019, 2 years ago. And that recent study concluded that a parking facility should be the last resort here. And I have to say, a parking facility might be the right thing, and it might be the right thing there. But it's this advice from the consultants that the town hired has been completely ignored. They had a number of other solutions to the perceived problem of parking. One of them was signage, one was lighting, one was using existing spots that are not used currently during the busiest hours for visitors, which was certain evenings. One is that they suggest that we use 2 feet less space for existing street parking spots. And another one, ironically, was that we required developers to provide 1 to 3 spaces per dwelling unit. So I don't think that there's been any further documentation at all about whether it's necessary or even wise to have such a parking facility. So that's really what my question is it needed? And if it is needed, could a new study perhaps determine where it is needed? or whether two smaller parking facilities would be better. I mean, we're just running blind here on the basis of these two counselors and the bid director, I think. So that's it. I'd be curious about what a study would say about, is it needed, and if so, where?
Thank you,
That's it.
Katie. Jay Silverstein, please give your name and your address.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, how is everyone? Thank you for the opportunity. Jay Silverstein, 32 North Prospect Street, Unit 4. I'm in one of the condos directly across the street of where the proposed garage will be. First, I'd like to start by saying to Mr. Malloy, I really appreciate the mumbo jumbo, but you didn't answer any of the questions for the residents. You just played a hot shot. Also, one of the things I'd like you to correct is you said that you're going to go up 12 feet with the greenery. The building, however, is going to be up to 48 feet. So that means 30 feet of garage you're going to let us look at. I appreciate that. Mr. Long, I don't really particularly like the way you snickered when you say noise is noise from the garage. We don't have any because half the garage is never more than half full, as the parking on the street. Now, let me just give you some numbers. There are 36 spaces now on North Prospect Street. There are 21 spaces on Halleck, and there's 75 in the lot that's there. That's 132 spaces. Ross and Ryan said, not 3 stories, but 3 levels. They said one could be lower and 2 could be above ground. At 65 spots, 65 spaces per level. That's 195. So 195 minus 132, you could do the math. It's 63 spaces. However, Carroll's Lane will probably also lose spaces. There are 13 spaces because it's a very narrow street, and in the winter, it's very unnavigable. So now we're down to 50 spaces. Then, of course, in the wisdom of the CRC, they took away the Main Street parking of another 31 spots. So now we have a net gain of parking of less than 50 spots. So it really, I don't know if it pays. Ms. Chow, you're really putting the cart before the horse. I mean, if a resident came to you and said they wanted to change their zoning, what would you do? Would you say, okay, change your zoning and then we'll see what you're going to build? You wouldn't do that, and I don't know why you're doing it to the residents of North Prospect Street and the surrounding area. These are you going to have the facade look like Grand Victorian homes? No builder will do that. And first of all, chances of it, with the speed that you want to be that you're acting in, and the lack of facts that are pertaining to this, I mean, the residents of North Prospect Street, as well as the other residents, we really suspect impropriety. I mean, how else can we think? You're not responding to the people. You're doing what you want to do. And to be honest with you, I'm looking at you all night, and you really have let's get rid of this. This is the attitude I'm picking up. Let's just vote on this and get rid of it. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silverstein. The next commenter will be Susanna Musprat. Name and address.
Hi, Susanna.
Hello, Susanna Musprat, 38 North Prospect Street. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I think you have my comments at some length in your packet, and I feel like I've said so many times what's objectionable about this garage. I would like some clarification, if somebody can give it, about who is going to be writing this RFP and whether there will be any opportunity for public input in the process of creating the RFP, or is that just going to be done sort of out of the public eye? I don't understand, particularly Ms. Chow, why you're saying that it's worth spending effort on looking at sites that are all over town that are affected by some zoning amendments, and it's not worth putting any effort into this particular overlay because this overlay is really to describe one building, and that is one parking garage. I don't understand why suddenly for the height you go with the RG height limit when you won't go with the RG side setbacks or front setbacks. I mean, a building that's right up to the street, practically in front, and 40 feet high is going to have an entirely different presence than one of the houses on the other side of the street that's 2.5 stories with a peaked roof with at least 10-foot side setbacks. Many of them have more, and at least 20 feet in front. We need to see how that build out is going to look in our neighborhood context. It's hard for people who are not architects to be able to imagine that in their head. And it would really help us if we could see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. That's the last public comment I see, at least at this time. I see Jack, you've got your hand up. Do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I want to reiterate that there's a perception for Amherst downtown that there's lack of parking. That's just I've heard that from 90% of the people that I've spoken with. So we do have this perception, and so a lot of folks are talking about finessing what's available or not. But I think there's this perception that and that's why this is appealing, I think. But I agree that it needs, it probably needs a little bit more of a look in terms of, finessing and expanding, but I do feel like we have to be careful that the design, this is zoning, this is not a design study. No one has proposed anything. And so I just feel like we're putting people are jumping to conclusions on this. But this is a much needed initiative, I think, that the town needs to push through.
Okay, thank you, Jack. I see Janet, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for the comments from people in the public. I always appreciate hearing from people. And I take it very seriously. I have a question is how much time would it take to do a massing study of the maximum build out of the parking garage with the surrounding buildings? And then, I would request make the facade on North Prospect Street look pretty, like it fits into a 19th century neighborhood, and then make it look like a parking garage. And so people might have very different reactions to the facade. And we can do design review standards. We can put them inside the zoning. I wouldn't rely on the design review board standards. I've never seen the planning board apply them. The design review board feels unheard, and things like that. So I just think I think it would help us to understand what we're approving. It would help the CRC. It will help the neighborhood. It might make them feel better because the setback is fairly large, the frontage space. It might make them feel better to see a facade that fits in. It might be, a factory building with some fancy work on it, interesting brickwork. And I just think, I don't know why we're pushing forward and sort of surging on, why not just do a little extra work, listen to concerns. Let's put something together that people support and don't feel opposed to. There's no rush for this. I mean, Gabrielle Gould said that this wouldn't even be, starting until 2024 or 2025. I think, let's take some time with it. But my question started with time, how long would it take to do a massing study and have the CRC and us take a look at it and the neighbors and the town council? Is that 8 hours? Is it 4 hours? It's sort of outside my wheelhouse.
Thanks, Janet. Chris or Nate, would either of you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, Jana, exactly how long. I think it would take, staff, a number of hours. I think my concern there is that, we could come up with a number of designs for what a parking garage may look like, but that's not actually what an applicant may propose. And so, are we writing design standards based on, one concept or many concepts? So I think, it is possible. I think it does take a little bit of time because, we don't have the other building, say, in a 3D model. So if we're going to be doing detail on the garage or a concept model and the other buildings are just big masses or blocks, I think people get tripped up in those details. And so I think a computer model is helpful for general massing, but to try to get detail and other things in it is like we tried with the BL overlay. Janet, you commented and said, well, it looks like we still could build ugly. And some of it is because computer renderings take a lot of time to make it look nice. And so a massing model or a concept study is a lot different than a detailed design model. And so I think a concept model is something that, staff could do in a few days. That's two staff working, at many hours a day. So we could, do the math. That's like, it's like 6 work days of time. But that's not providing detail or things that would be necessary that you're asking for. So that's not, showing facade details or treatments because that's really difficult to articulate.
So, because I've seen like
Thank you, Nate. Chris, do you want to comment on that at all?
Well, I would like to comment because, we have a lot of other things that we're working on, and to take, 6 days of time to do a massing model for a garage that may look completely different from what we imagine in our massing model doesn't seem like a good use of staff time. We have many urgent, pressing things that we're trying to accomplish. So I don't necessarily think that you need that in order to make a decision, but I'm not making the decision, so that's
Right.
up to you.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I think what I'd like to do is to ask people to indicate whether they are comfortable making a decision one way or the other tonight. So the first roll call I'd like to do is whether you're comfortable doing any sort of decision making tonight. All right. So Maria, are you comfortable making a decision one way or the other tonight?
Yes.
Okay. Tom, what about you?
I'm comfortable with that, yes. And recognizing that we're making a decision about zoning and not approving a parking garage building to be built, yes.
Okay. Janet?
So I am not comfortable. Like I listed this before the meeting that we have no massing study. We don't know the number of parking spaces in a garage, the need for the parking, the economic feasibility, no comparison with other sites. We don't know what's going to be removed on North Prospect Street and Coles. We haven't discussed possible traffic impacts. We have no, very little understanding of the impacts on the neighbors and on the CVS and St. Bridget's use of their property with no setbacks. So I count like 11 things that we don't know. We probably don't need to know 11, but we need to know a bunch of them. So I would say no.
No, you are not comfortable.
No, I guess not at all.
Okay, thank you. Johanna?
I'd be comfortable moving ahead with this first step.
Okay, and Jack?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the fence, but with a slim margin, I will,
So this is simply, do we want to have a vote to recommend or not tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I have to defer to what Maria and Tom's input really kind of soothe some of my concerns. But
okay.
It's a difficult.
You're on the fence.
Yes, it's a complex, piece for the downtown. There's no doubt.
And not without controversy.
Right.
I do see 2 more hands in the public. see. Mr. Peltz, I see you have your hand up. Is that a legacy hand, or would you like to make one more comment?
Just give me a few more seconds. I was out Friday night with my wife to Greenfield to see that parking garage that was mentioned 2 times before that it was already there. That would be a masking thing. Run up there and take a look at what it looks like. And also notice that it is nowhere near any residences. It's in a large building area and a parking lot, large parking, open parking lot that's opposite to it.
Right.
Take a trip and take a look. You'll have your masking and you'll see the monstrosity they want to build. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peltz. And Ms. Parker.
Hi, Ronnie.
Hi. So, yeah, I was making the same point that a neighbor of mine did go and see the actual site, and it's nothing like our context. Therefore, I think an important issue is, do the people who you represent, whose interests you're supposed to represent, do we need to see this? And we do, because I have to say, honestly, I'm usually the proponent of local economic development. I would.
Ms. Parker, yeah,
Okay.
you muted
Sorry,
yourself.
I feel really strange being in a situation that's contrary to my usual, which is pushing economic development. I feel strange being in this place. The truth is, I heard from a neighbor who actually went and saw this garage that you all showed and told me the same thing that Mr. Peltz just did. So we need to see what this is going to look like. That does not apply to our context. That is not a good example of what we're dealing with. Therefore, we need to see what it looks like. And the reality is, yes, there's a cost. But look, all of this stuff has a cost, and we have to think about it. If we're not willing to do this cost, then what's the goal? I mean, if the goal is really important to us, we should be willing to invest in making it happen. So I'm not, I have to say, I feel strange. I'm a proponent of economic development. I'm not the person who comes out and says, don't do it. But in this case, we just don't have the information. And for me, it would be very helpful to see what exactly will this look and feel like. So I also suggest that it's a good investment. And in fact, the town should be prepared to make more investments if you're considering any development option, because it costs to ensure that the public interest is well represented. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So since there seemed to be at least a reasonable level of support for making some sort of decision this evening, does anybody want to make a motion to recommend this to town council? I think if that would be the preferred form of the motion, so that a yes vote means we recommend and a no vote means we do not recommend. Tom, I think you got your hand up first.
Do I move to vote to recommend?
Thank you. And Maria, your hand was second?
Second.
Second. Okay. Do we have any further conversation by the board this evening about this? Okay, Janet.
What was your feeling about is the time to go forward? Doug?
Okay, so I guess my feeling is that this is an incremental step. It is not a definitive step that will result in a garage. I think Maria was right in that she pointed out that when we are making decisions about multiple parcels with multiple owners, there's no one private entity that would be motivated to study an entire district that is beyond the extent of their property holdings. However, in this case, because this is a single parcel, anybody that wants to put forward a proposal for this will have control of the entire area. And therefore they will have the motivation to do the study that needs to happen. They will have to study the traffic impacts because we will require them to do that. They will have to study the financial feasibility of it and whether this parcel is large enough for a parking garage, because they'll want to probably not lose a lot of money on it. And so, you know, at this point, we're recommending to town council, and town council may not adopt it. Town council may adopt it, in which case they probably will recommend that town staff prepare this RFP. I presume there would be public input into that, and that town council would probably want there to be, simply to make sure that constituents continue to feel heard. There may be nobody that responds to the RFP because their back of the envelope assessment before they do a real proposal is that it's not feasible. So there's a number of ways in which I view this as an incremental step. And given that this has been a point of conversation for decades in this town, and that we took this property by eminent domain in the 70s, I think, it doesn't seem to be a bad idea to finally move it far enough forward to actually get some answers on whether it makes sense. So, Jack, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, very good comments, Doug. I feel like the building block sense of this is very important. It's not the end all. There's nothing complete. There's nothing, you know, there's no design that we're approving here, but there's a concept to alleviate the perception that there is a parking issue downtown, which again, for me is very apparent. So I appreciate that, Doug. I appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Janet?
I think it'd be really useful if the planning board was involved with the RFP creation, because we've heard a lot from the public about what they're concerned about. And, you know, we do have a responsibility, and I think it'd be good for us to be part of that, to kind of reflect the concerns and issues that were raised. So I wondered about your thoughts on that too.
Well, I have to confess, I don't know enough about what the town process is for developing RFPs to know whether it would make sense for us. You know, I think there'll be a number of groups that want to be, at least have their voices heard. Chris, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, we do from time to time have groups, or at least individuals from groups that participate in the RFP process. We had participation from the chair of the Housing Trust in the development of the RFP for the Belchertown Road and East Street project that would provide affordable housing. So I think that we could conceivably get the planning board involved in the development of the RFP, or at least reviewing what we develop.
Okay, great. All right, we have a motion on the floor and a second. I don't see any more hands, so why don't we go ahead through the roll call. All right, in the order of my squares on my screen, Maria.
Approve.
Tom, this is to recommend to town council.
Approve to recommend to council.
All right, Janet.
Disapprove.
Thank you. Johanna.
Aye.
Jack.
Aye.
And I am an aye. So we have 5 in favor, 1 opposed, and 1 absent. All right, at this time, it's just before 9. We'll take a 5-minute break, check on the Red Sox, and
may I suggest that you close the public hearing if that's your intention.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you, Chris, for keeping me honest here. So I'm closing the public hearing at 8:57. And we'll take a 5-minute break, come back at 2 minutes after 9. Please turn off your video and mute yourself until you're back. Thank you. For those of you that came in late, we had a mistake in terms of our procedure, and we never voted on Janet's motion for the changes to the bylaw. So I think we need to go through a roll call for that. I guess I need to ask was there any more conversation about that people wanted to have? All right, so I don't see any hands for that. So I'll just go through the roll call here. Maria?
No.
Janet?
Yes.
Jack? You are muted, Jack.
Geez, so bad at that. So I would say nay, but I think the town council will know and the CRC will know, our concerns.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Tom?
Nay.
And Johanna?
Nay.
And I'm a nay. Okay, so I think that cleans up the procedure for that. So the time now is 9:07. And the next item is under old business, the zoning bylaw, Article 3, use regulations, Section 3.325, mixed use buildings, and Article 12, definitions. Discussion and review of proposed revisions and possible revote on recommendation to town council. Chris, I would like you to introduce this.
So I think Nate is going to give some introductory remarks, but I wanted to say that you did vote to recommend the mixed use building zoning amendment on, I think it was August 18th.
Yep.
And since then, we've had some discussions here about the lack of clarity in the description of non-residential use. And we've realized that the bylaw as it was recommended on the 18th was not clear in the way that non-residential use could be interpreted. And so we went back and tried to figure out how we could make it better. And that involved splitting out some uses like common space, et cetera. And so we are coming back to you. You've seen versions of this over the last, 2 months now. And you haven't actually had a chance to discuss it. And it has evolved further. So Nate can talk about its further evolution, but I just wanted to put that in context. So you've made a recommendation and we're coming back to you with a revised proposal and ask you to make a recommendation on the revised proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So Nate, I guess it's your turn.
Sure, thanks. It's also the CRC is holding a new hearing on mixed use as well. The planning board.
And this will be October 26th as well?
Right. So the planning board doesn't necessarily have to hold a new hearing, but the timing requirements do hold to the Community Resource Committee. So there wasn't a recommendation made within the time frame allowed. So they're issuing, they issued a new notice and public hearing for next week.
Okay.
And so, yeah, Chris is right. So I'm gonna share my screen. So on August 18th, the planning board recommended the amendment at that time. And then in the packet for September 1st and then for September 14th, there were, updates to the mixed use bylaw in the packet, but were never discussed. And then now it's here tonight. And so, there are incremental changes on the 1st and the 14th, and then tonight that are all consolidated into one. But I just want to show the 18th amendment, where, this is formatted as it was. It's from the packet on August 18th. And so we'd be, we wouldn't be changing the permitting in the zoning districts. That remains the same. We'd be removing the standards and conditions in the use chart, and then providing, these 5 standards and then a definition. And so on the 18th, we said no more than 60% of the gross floor area of the first or ground floor shall be a combination of residential use or parking, including incidental or associated spaces. And then we have the 40% gross floor area for any permitted non-residential use other than parking. And so that's a minimum. So it could be more, but at least 40%. As Chris mentioned, this includes incidental and associated spaces. And since the 18th here, there's some discussion about, could this 40% also be split amongst different buildings, or how would that be calculated if there are 2 buildings on a site? Could the 40% be spread out over 2 floors? So if someone wants to have some upper floor uses, it also didn't include common space. So there's been some discussions about if there's a common lobby, hallway, elevators, other things, could how would that be calculated toward the 40%? So those, these standards have been updated. Any dwelling units located and enclosed parking on the first or ground floor shall be located at the rear of the building and designed to reduce visibility from the public way or walkways. That was in there on the 18th. Sloping lots with frontage on more than one right of way. The permit granting authority shall determine what is the, really the first floor or ground floor. And then we're proposing a bedroom count, a mix of bedroom sizes consistent with apartments, so that no more than 50% of the total dwelling units shall have the same bedroom count, except for mixed-use buildings with less than 10 units. And we're also proposing a definition in Article 12. A mixed-use building is a building containing 1 or more dwelling units in combination with permitted non-residential uses. So, in our bylaw, we don't define a live-work building, or if it's 2 units or 1 non-residential use. And so really any combination of those would be a mixed-use building. And so, it's just a broader, it's a definition that would apply to any combination. And so this bylaw amendment was recommended. And since then, we've staff have made a few changes. It was in the packet, and it's really shown and highlighted in yellow. And so, I think there's a few differences here. We're saying, I'll start with the 30% here. We're saying now at least 30% of the gross floor area of the ground floor or first floor shall be a permitted non-residential use other than parking, including incidental spaces. And this is the new changes. So some of these changes were in the packet on the 1st and the 14th, and it's been consolidated now, except that the permit granting authority may allow the required non-residential uses to be distributed on any floor or in any building of a multiple building development on the same parcel, provided that the portion of the ground floor or first floor of any building facing the street be occupied predominantly by such non-residential uses. And what this means is that the 30% could be split between floors, so long as the ground or first floor facing the street be predominantly occupied by the non-residential use. And street is a defined term in the zoning bylaw. So before we had said areas customarily used by the public or walkways, and that was somewhat confusing. And so really, this is trying to get at having, a majority of the street side be non-residential use, active non-residential use. And this is something that would be discussed during permitting. What does predominantly mean? We've also added this section: for the purposes of this section, incidental spaces shall not include common areas shared by multiple uses or other spaces not contiguous to the non-residential use unless the space is included in the description of the premises leased to the non-residential tenant. And we did this, for instance, someone could try to satisfy the 40% by having some space along the street and then having storage in the back of the building, or having, incidental or common spaces that they would count towards this, the non-residential gross floor area. But it really doesn't achieve what we wanted. I have some illustrations that that'll help explain this. And so really this 30% now of the gross floor area is active non-residential use. So it's really, although it's a smaller percentage than before, it is actually, it takes away any of the common spaces or other incidental spaces that could be counted towards that, what was the 40%. And so we changed the 70% here of the first or ground floor shall be residential use, parking, or common areas shared by multiple uses. So basically anything other than the non-residential use is now calculated as part of the 70%. And so that helps clarify that calculation. The other conditions are the same, except that we've now used the defined term of street. So dwelling units and parking would be at the rear of the building and designed to reduce visibility from the street. And same thing for sloping lots with frontage on more than one street. So that's a defined term that we wanted to use. And the definition is still the same, one or more dwelling units. And so the text in yellow is what's changed from the 18th. Some of this was in the CRC recommended earlier that the permit granting authority allow units to be distributed, or the space to be distributed on any floor. And that was going to come back to the planning board in September, but we never discussed it. So most of this change was in a previous version that was in the packet.
Okay, is that it?
No, I just want to, there's an illustration here that
good.
Hopefully can help. So, there's two examples of a mixed use building. So currently in the bylaw, the October version, 30%, it's a minimum 30% be non-residential use, including incidental space or that is contiguous with the active non-residential use, or non-contiguous space that may have a lease agreement. And then, no more than 70% could be residential, parking, or common areas. And so here's an actual building, Beacon Street in Boston. And, the color coding, the pink is the commercial or the non-residential space. The blue is the common spaces, and the yellow is residential. And so, right now the retail is 45 to 50% of the floor area of the first floor. It's more than the minimum 30%. It's just, this is an illustration. But before, without defining the common areas, there could be an argument made that half of the blue space or more would actually be considered part of the retail, because they would say, oh, well, this hallway is being used to get to the back door of this retail space, or people who come into the building to use the non-residential space may be using the stairwell and walking through here. And so we've clarified that to say that any of this hallway space doesn't count toward the 30% anymore. And so someone can't try to, say, well, half this common space is really part of this calculation. And again, here's another mixed use building from Portland. It's a little bit more complex. And again, the red is the non-residential space, the blue is common, and the yellow here is parking. It could be considered residential. And what this is showing is there are storage areas here and here in the back. There's bike storage here. There's trash here. There's a lobby that's common to, could get into some of the retail spaces, but it's also for residents. So there's a mail room here, there's elevators. And so in this example, an applicant could have said, well, we think most of this lobby is actually going to serve one or two businesses. We think this hallway is really used for, half of the space could be counted toward the retail square footage calculation. And we're now defining it as common area that's considered part of the 70% calculation. And, in this example, if we said, okay, well, half this blue area could be considered part of the non-residential calculation, in effect, you'd be losing a significant amount of square foot that's actively used for, a business or commercial or office use. And so staff thinks that those changes in the language help with, how an applicant would measure and how a board would review those calculations. For instance, if this storage area back here where the cursor is, if people can see that, if that was in a lease agreement, that, this retail space was using this as part of their inventory storage, then that could be counted as part of the 30%, but it would have to be shown at time of application that there's a lease agreement that space is part of the non-residential use. And I think that's it right now. Like I said, the CRC made a recommendation as well back in September, and they're going to be looking at this again next week to take up this new version.
Thanks, Nate. I want to mention that the time is 9:21 and Andrew has arrived. Just for the minutes.
I got there about 15 minutes ago.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Working.
Let's see. Chris, do you want to say anything else about this? I know your hand is not up, but before we get into the conversation.
I don't think so at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Janet, you had your hand up for a while. You want to?
So I found this new language almost hopelessly confusing. And so if it was meant to clarify something, I just got lost and I read it over and over again. And so I think I don't understand it. And I sort of understand your explanation, but I don't think this language clarifies what you're trying to get to. And so I was just thinking you could just say no common spaces will be counted as non-residential use. That could just be a simple line. Because the word incidental kind of shows up and it's incidental to residential use or non-residential use. And it just swam around the paragraphs to me in a way that I just couldn't understand. And so, anyway, I tried hard. So I think the CRC was suggested reducing the non-residential, the commercial space from 40% to 30%. I mean, I think that's where it comes from. I don't think it comes from planning department staff. And so I don't support that. I thought we should do 60% for commercial uses, not 30%. And I did go to one of the CRC meetings, and I do agree with Steve Schreiber. It was like too confusing to have the space kind of wandering around. You lose the street front part of the buildings, the commercial street front. And the language was just confusing. And so if somebody has 40% commercial on the first floor and wants to do a rooftop restaurant, that will stand on its own legs. If they can make money doing that, they'll do that. We don't have to have every building be mostly residential. It could be a mix, but we do have to have a strong commercial presence on the first floor. So I'm sticking with Steve, what I said at that meeting. And but I think the language you put in here, I was just lost in it. And I do understand the change to street. That seems super clear. So those are my 3 points.
Thank you. Thanks, Janet. Any other comments? And I have a couple of questions for Nate. Chris.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the going from 40% to 30%, and that was not something that originated in the CRC. It originated in the planning department and with Rob Mora and the planning staff. When we started to look at taking out any portion of the common space, we realized that the net result would be approximately the same, whether you had 40% that included common space or 30% that didn't include common space. We also had heard from, and I think Janet was part of this conversation, that Gabrielle Gould felt that 40% was way too much, and that nobody would ever be able to fill that. So that was also part of the mix of the conversation that we had. So I just wanted to acknowledge that it came from the planning department staff and from Rob Mora. It didn't come from CRC, and they haven't had an opportunity to review this yet. I think that was all I wanted to say right now.
Okay, thanks. Andrew.
Thanks, Doug. And Chris, thanks for adding that Gabby Gould did mention that surprised me a little bit. It does sort of seem like we're going the wrong direction, but that makes sense when you describe it as like the trade-off of 30% plus the comment is equal to the 40%. But the notion that we couldn't put 40%, that 40% is too high seems a little far-fetched, unless we're really building out, really massive buildings that are just going from property line to property line. I'll just say that it's. Sorry, I don't have a question here, but just as a thought, it just seems like we're moving further and further away from having the really vibrant downtown and building out areas which just really could be primarily residential. Thanks.
Chris?
Yeah, I just remembered what the other thing I wanted to say is that incidental space and common space are different. Common space is shared space that's shared by the different uses in the building. Incidental space would be things like storage for a retail place, or, the back part of the kitchen in a restaurant, or, just places that public wouldn't go to, but are associated with a specific use. So that's what incidental space is. And incidental space is included in this 30%, but common space is not included because that's shared space. Thank you.
Maria.
More of a clarification, Nate. So you talked about the 40 going to 30, but then you kind of folded in a part about the as long as most of the retail's predominantly occupying the street side on the first floor. But then how did that relate to like multiple buildings and other places other than the first floor? Is that like basically the developer or property owner can do whatever they want beyond the 30% minimum? Or how did the other locations relate to this change in percentage?
Sure. So the 30% is a minimum, and the requirement is so that at least 30% of the building has to be non-residential, and the ground or first floor facing the street has to be predominantly that use, non-residential use. And so, what we determine is that if someone wants to do 2 floors of or have non-residential uses on 2 floors, it could be in excess of 30%, but they could just be at 30% and still meet that requirement. And so the way the bylaw was written previously is that the 40% had to only be on the ground floor. And so if you're putting a second floor of non-residential use, that would have to be basically beyond the 40%. And so now we're allowing that 30% to be distributed so long as the streetscape is still maintained as a non-residential use. And staff talked about having some other requirements there, like so much of the frontage be built out, there's different ways to phrase it, but, we left it as predominantly non-residential because that's something the permit granting authority can really discuss, what is appropriate for each building and each site.
I guess Maria, is that legacy hand?
Well,
I
was sort of following up. So, say you have 100 feet of frontage and 30% of it is retail, but say you have some on the second floor, then is it 15% per floor? Am I doing that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that becomes, an applicant would have to describe if they have, a 5,000 square foot building, then, they need 30% of it has to be non-residential use.
Okay.
And then, and then if there's multiple buildings on a property, it's the first floor, say there's 2 buildings and they're both 5,000 square feet, then it's 10,000 square feet. So you have 3,000 square feet have to be non-residential.
I see. Right. Because yeah, of course, area is different than frontage. So you could have the majority of frontage, even though it's less
smaller
percentage
percentage.
of, okay, gotcha. Okay. All right. Got it. Thank you.
Well, that gets into one question I had, which had to do with multiple building developments, because it seemed like the gross floor area of the first or ground floor was kind of ambiguous, whether it was only applying to buildings that had frontage on the street or buildings that didn't and would be counted. So I think that seemed a little bit like something we could get into a fight about and it wouldn't have a clear answer. And I guess the word predominant, I mean, I'm kind of thinking about the parking conversation we had where we were comfortable having conversation about what was adequate. And I guess I'm imagining that this might be another common topic of conversation about what's predominant, which, I guess I'm not sure I'm crazy about, but I guess I wonder what other people think. I was surprised to see the allowance for distributing the required area onto multiple floors, because I thought we were pretty clear that we wanted the non-residential use to enliven the street. And, it's not going to do anything for the street if it moves upstairs or downstairs. So, I guess I'm kind of tepid about this change.
I think just quickly, Doug, I think there's still a requirement that the first floor be non-residential use and then occupy, a majority of the street frontage. So, that still has to be satisfied. And then if they need to go, if they haven't reached the 30% that way and they wanted to do a second floor use, they could. So there's still a requirement that the street be non-residential use.
Okay. Okay, Janet, it looks like your hand was next.
Yes, I have a two-part question. I think, I don't know if I misheard you, Nate, or when you were answering Maria. So 30% of what? So is it 30% of the first floor area or 30% of the entire area of all the building or all the buildings?
Well, so it's, if there's one building, it's 30% of the floor area, right? So if it's a 5,000 square foot building, then it's 30% of that building. If there's two buildings, it's 30% of both buildings.
But it's only the first floor.
Right. It's only the first, the footprint, the gross floor area of the first floor. That's the way it's always been calculated. So if the first floor is 5,000 square feet, it's a percentage of that.
So it's 30% of 5,000 can be distributed throughout one building or several buildings, as long as the predominant view or whatever is on the street. There's some stores on the street. I'm just kind of, anyway, okay, so I understand that. I guess so I looked up predominant and it says presents as the strongest or main element having or exerting control or power. And so I think it is a really fuzzy word. And so I'm just kind of, I don't understand. It'd be hard to see that if you had 30% of your first floor area spread around several floors, okay, so then you have to have something in the front to make it predominantly commercial. But most stores, or most restaurants go back a lot. They use a lot of the space. I mean, I don't know if you're just going to have a row of ATMs or small, shops or tiny shops that don't, so I'm kind of, I don't know. I don't get it. The other thing is in terms of incidental, I wonder if you need to define it or even use it. So if I have a restaurant and the front of my restaurant is seating and the back of my restaurant is kitchen, I don't think anyone, and then there's storage behind it. I don't think anyone would disagree that the kitchen and the storage was part of the restaurant. It's not incidental to it, it's part of the restaurant. And so if I have a shop and the whole front part of it is, displaying items, and down a hallway in the back, I have some storage for my clothes, that's not really incidental, it's part of your shop. And so I don't know if you even have to kind of make incidental, why do we need it there? And then it just sort of wanders around paragraphs in a really confusing way. So I'm wondering if there's a way to simplify this.
Nate, does the incidental come into play when the storage is not contiguous with the rest of the leased area?
It does. I think a lot of mixed use bylaws do define incidental, because I think otherwise you might be getting people who will, not have a very big active space, but then have incidental space to count towards that percentage, right? The utility room, the mop sink, the storage that is, down the hall past residential uses. And so, I think, in the last example you gave, Janet, where the store has inventory, that incidental space, depending on where it is, may not count towards the 30%. And so I think it is important to have that in there, because otherwise, I think, when the previous bylaw was proposed, staff discussed it with different people, and we were learning of ways to get around that calculation, right? Of how to have it, how to have an argument that incidental spaces could be actually almost half the active retail space. So in essence, you'd only have 20% of your floor area be active, and the other 20% would be incidental space. And so we're really trying to define it in a way that limits that ability.
All right, Tom.
I heard, thanks, Doug. I heard Gabrielle talk about this opportunity to move some of that ground floor square footage up into the building and distribute it. And I saw value in that, but I'm also concerned about the 30% being divvied up over multiple floors and how that could be exploited. And that, as someone mentioned, could have a really big facade with ATMs on the ground floor and something on the second floor that's offices or whatnot, and it really won't contribute to the liveliness of the grounds floor experience along the street. So I have some hesitancy about that being an unrestricted rule, that as long as the predominant facade, I guess I see too many, as a creative person, I see too many ways to get around that, and I don't feel like it's contributing to what we're trying to achieve here. I think we did reduce to 30% from where we started, and a lot of push for more. And I was okay with getting down to 40, and now I'm okay with getting down to 30 with the understanding of this other space, but I'm not so sure that giving up the ground floor, active ground floor, is what we want to do in this particular case. So this is my thoughts on that.
Sure, yeah. I don't think we're giving up the active ground floor, because it still needs to be, most of the street-facing facade still needs to be active non-residential. I also think it's then part of the permit granting authority's ability to ask for that during permitting. And so, you could ask an applicant to present a different design if they come in showing something that doesn't enliven the street. It's the permit granting authority's ability to say, we want to see a better design. And so,
I think Nate, I'd rather see a waiver for that. I'd rather have them say, oh, we can't fit it all on the first floor. Here's why. Let's get an application to do something different. And that might be, to me, that I feel more comfortable asserting that we want this on the ground floor rather than creating the loophole up front. And we might ask people to prove that they need something different.
Thanks, Tom. Andrew.
Thanks, Doug. I agree with something Janet said earlier about, the notion of incidental space. The retail lease would include the back of house for storage or kitchen, whatever. I think that, to me, that is also clearly would be part of the retail. I like the idea also of second floor. Well, I'm not sure I should say also. I like the idea of second floor commercial use, in that I think I mentioned this one other meeting that, the active street front is more about the frontage than the square footage. I think like it's walking down the street and seeing, being presented with things, right? So like a bowling alley configured shape is not adding as much value as like something that's really broad. So I like the idea of inviting second floor. I had a question though, because if there was any second floor use, they would need to have elevators. So would the elevator, what would that count towards? Because if we're thinking about spaces that are, 4,000 or 5,000 square foot floor plans, they're gonna eat up a fair amount for the vertical transportation. So what would that count towards?
Yeah, I think if that's a common elevator, then it counts as common space and not toward the 30%. If it's an elevator that is, distinct to that upper floor use, then it would count towards the, that 30% or that non-residential use square footage.
Okay, so if the elevator was for the retail use, it would count towards that space. That would count as retail space. The elevator
Right, but
shaft.
typically, if it's if there's an elevator that has a common, it's shared by all tenants, residential, non-residential in a building, then that's a common space, and it's not, it doesn't count towards that 30%.
Yeah. Thank you.
Maria.
I think I finally get it, Nate. So basically, you haven't changed what the bylaw is asking as far as how much street frontage you want. It's just reducing that sort of square footage definition as far as like which uses count toward that square footage of 30 versus 40. And you're saying it's kind of a wash because you've now defined enough things to go back out of that, how am I explaining this? Back out of that non-residential portion. Anyways, I think some of my confusion might have caused more confusion, but you're not actually reducing the amount of street frontage. You're just reducing sort of what counts toward that square footage on the first floor to hit as far as the minimum of 30%. And I think what's also kind of mudding thing is that you are suddenly throwing all these other things in about like where it can be located. And so there's this worry like, oh, now our first floor is even less retail, but actually it's the same frontage retail ideally. It's just now you're giving a little bit more sort of flexibility as far as making sure someone doesn't come in and like cheat the system and try to put more sort of storage space and say, well, we hit the 40 because, even though we did with back of house storage or mostly with common hallway, or you've eliminated that sort of loophole in a way. So it still seems safe, but I do hear a lot of people just saying, oh my gosh, we're losing first floor retail. And maybe there's a way to clarify it somehow so that people don't feel that, because that was my first gut. I thought, wait a minute, are we losing anything really? And I had to do some math and figure out what you were defining as far as street face versus area versus. So maybe there's a way just to, I don't know, maybe it is semantics or some things that Janet touched on about like using words that are a little less loaded maybe. I agree predominant is very open-ended, but then we were also in previous meetings, I remember we were saying, well, don't be so prescriptive with like an exact, linear footage of street frontage because every parcel is different. So yeah, it's a hard line to walk because you on one hand want to be definitive about what it is you want, but then not so much that some parcels are penalized. So I don't know. I guess I don't feel like, this is something that's necessarily taking away from our street liveliness. Honestly, I don't think that this is doing that because what you're saying, but I think maybe the word predominant maybe is, that's our only thing we have to hang our hat on, right? As far as guaranteeing that we still have that active street front. So I don't know, I guess with all these shifting numbers, it just feels like, oh, are we losing that? But I don't think we are, but maybe there's a way to strengthen the sort of street frontage predominant definition somehow. How that is, I don't know. But I feel like, yeah, a lot of concerns about something that's maybe not actually there. Does that make sense?
Chris, how badly do you need us to vote on this?
So normally the CRC tells us that they like to have the planning board recommendation before they make their recommendation. On the other hand, they're meeting on the 26th, and if they make a recommendation that night, the planning board could meet on November 3rd. Is that right? Yeah, November 3rd is the date of your first meeting in November, and talk about this then, and you could probably have a recommendation before this actually gets to town council. I'm not sure when it's going to get to town council, but probably sometime in late November or early December.
Well, I guess what I was really asking was, what if you don't get another recommendation from us?
Oh, well, then we live with what we've got from August. And that poses problems. I think it would pose problems to the building commissioner as far as interpretation, but he's very smart and he can probably figure it out. But
well, I guess I'm thinking more about, obviously there's some misgivings here on the board tonight. You do have a timeline. If you just end up at the town council with one version from CRC and another from planning board, does town council have the ability to decide which one they like, or pick, edit to be in the middle or something?
I think that's going to be a challenge for them. They don't have as much opportunity to discuss things as you do.
Okay. So we really need to kind of run this to ground and decide whether we like it.
Either tonight or November 3rd.
Right.
Preferably tonight, but.
Right. And how open are you to us changing this language? I mean, do you simply want an up or down? We like this or we don't?
No, so, I mean, I'll speak. I think, I agree that there, although the language, there hasn't been a lot of language added. I think there are, a number of pieces that have changed in terms of, as we've said, the distribution amongst floors, this 30% predominantly along the street. So, the predominant, that description. So I think, multiple buildings on a property. So I think there are a number of pieces that have been added. I think, the defining of common space and incidental space. So I think, I do think it is a lot to come to an agreement on this evening. And so, I mean, I've taken a page of notes, and I feel like, it would take some time with staff to discuss how can we address some of these questions and refine the language, and then if there's still more discussion to be had. So I don't know. I feel like we were getting, I feel like there was some common themes that were being presented that we could discuss on how to, refine the bylaw.
All right. So you're open to taking our comments from this evening and coming back on the 3rd?
I would be.
I see Chris nodding, and okay. So, all right. So thank you both. Jack, I see your hand.
Yeah. I'm just interested in the conceptual model where the developer wants to put all their marbles, say, on the rooftop situation, but yet they still, per this, propose, the way the language is right now, they need something along the storefront. So minimally along, the street front there for a building, what would pass and what would allow, the flexibility for the developer to, to go with something on more on the upper floors versus the 30% on the first floor.
Well, isn't that going to be a question for each planning board to consider when they see a design for each mixed-use building? Do we think that whatever's happening at the first floor street qualifies as predominant?
Yeah, I guess conceptually, I'm wondering what that would be though, for, if, in a minimalist sort of first floor frontage thing, what would that be? If, the development of the multi-use building was on, second or, top floor of the building. I'm just trying to get a feel for that.
Yeah, can I just say quickly, Doug, Jack, I think that's a really good question because, staff, for instance, some bylaws will say that, it's 85% of the frontage of the building or 85% of the lot needs to be developed as non-residential to a depth of, say, 20 feet or 40 feet. But, we felt that getting those types of parameters in there could actually, discourage some other uses. So if we just said 20 feet deep, then now you're going to get something that's 20 feet deep where a restaurant might need 50 feet. And so it's kind of difficult to have a number of kind of parameters that, may exclude some possibilities. And so I understand the language we have here is a little, I think Janet said fuzzy. Some of that was to have some flexibility on part of the applicant and as part of the review from the planning board to be able to have those discussions on a project application. But I think, yes, an interesting question. What's the minimum an applicant could do, right? Along the street, really, is what you're asking if they want to have most of that 30% on an upper floor. Yep.
Okay. Janet?
So I'm going back to the multiple buildings. So if you had 3 buildings on your lot, can you spread your 30% of does it have to be 30% of the first floor of each building? That's the count, or just the building fronting the street?
It is, the way staff was expecting it is 30% of each building. So it's 30% of the gross floor area of the first floor of all buildings.
Okay, because that's not clear. I would be really helped when we come back to this to have a chart with a split screen with what we approved, I think back in August, and then the language on the other side that, either it's longer, but it's addressing the issue in a different way. Because I thought the stuff I still think we should do more than 40%, but I thought I understood what we approved, and I'm just struggling to understand this language. I find it very confusing. So I think it'd be helpful to me to see, what we approved and what you're asking us to approve. And then I think we're all struggling to understand the meaning of it. And then I do sort of dread, passing on to planning boards or ZBAs of the future, this struggle of like, what's the minimum amount in the front? And I think Maria, please correct me, but I think you have said it's hard to convert space from commercial to residential or residential to commercial. I can't remember which, but I think we would like to leave the first floor able for different commercial uses, not just, honed for, you want to see a restaurant or a bookshop or that space to be flexible, because we've seen that over time, over hundreds of years, different businesses come and go. And so we might be constraining too much by putting a lot of residential on the first floor with, 20% on fourth floor and, whatever, but, it just seems, what's the best thing for our businesses and small businesses through time. So, but I think a side-by-side chart would help me because I'm kind of lost here. And
Thanks, Tom?
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify that I think the only thing that I'm really concerned about is the distribution of buildings and the distribution of floors. But I just wanted to clarify that I understand where the 30% is coming from and what trade-offs are being made, and I understand what is and isn't changing in the other language regarding the incidentals. I just think we want to put the onus on the developer to convince us as to why we can't have those commercial uses on the ground floor. And I can see reasons why those are compelling to do that. I think the predominant language is probably okay to give us a leg to pressure them, but I still think that we want to we want to push them to convince us otherwise, as opposed to the other way around. So that's how I was approaching that.
Okay, Chris.
I just wanted to mention the possibility of a special permit. That's something that I've been kind of talking about in the office. And, people are sort of suspicious of special permits. They think the planning board grants all the special permits and that the ZBA does too, and that doesn't really mean anything. But it's another way to approach this. If we wanted to allow flexibility and not have to kind of go through the gyrations of the language that we're trying to come up with now, would it be useful to try to think about how a special permit might be able to help us to make this more flexible? So anyway, I'm just going to plant that seed.
I mean, if you're thinking, the space that we could initially mandate on the first floor, we could potentially allow it on other floors through special permit. I think that would get at what Tom is advocating, and looks like he agrees with me. And I think that would go a ways to satisfying some of my concerns. So it's just about 10 o'clock. It sounds like it would be okay for us to come back to this November 3rd. Chris, do we have a particularly full agenda that night? Or Pam?
Well, you have another another zoning bylaw that night, which is the parking bylaw. We were trying to kind of distribute the zoning,
Right.
so you wouldn't have like a whole night of zoning, but that is one thing that's on your agenda for the 3rd. Is the
Are there any specific, actual projects looking for site plan reviews or anything?
No, there won't be, because
So at the moment, it would just be the zoning bylaws,
yeah,
and there's only the two.
there would be the two if you continue this public hearing. And by the
Right.
way, I don't know if you wanted to take public comment.
Right.
Or you decide to
Yeah.
continue.
Right. Okay. So I don't see any more hands from the board. We have an attendee hand up. Pam Rooney, why don't you give us your name and your address?
Hi, Pam.
Hi, Pam. Pam Rooney, 42 Cottage Street. I want to say thank you. Actually, oops, you only gave me 1 minute.
No, I'm resetting. Sorry. It's okay. You're okay.
I want to just say thank you for actually letting the public speak again. I think my comment tonight is that I continue to feel very strongly that the long night of 4 zoning bylaws being discussed and the public hearings being held and closed all in one night was just nonsense, when clearly this particular bylaw has had so many tweaks and reorganizations and continuing to sort of mull it over and make it something better. And I just want to say, I think in the future, can we please guard against the rush to try to have a public hearing and close it in order, to avoid having the public being able to weigh in. I guess I would, my actual comment on this particular bylaw, it seems like it's going in the wrong direction. And I think I would still feel strongly to say, let's have 40% be non-residential use, not counting any additional common space, but you provide 40% of actual factual non-residential space. And let's not let it slide. Having a waiver for a request to put some of that square footage on another floor makes sense, but I would say don't give it to them to begin with. Thanks.
Thanks, Pam. Next we have John W.
Hi, John.
All right, everybody hear me?
Yes, please give us your name and your address.
Hi, yeah, John Roboleski. I own property on the corner of Gray and Main Street and Main Street. Seems like all this talk about the mixed use and changing this bylaw is pretty much geared to the downtown area where you want to enliven the streetscape and where there's a lot of foot traffic. And I'm a little concerned about having it apply to the outlying neighborhood business where you don't get that foot traffic. And there's some spaces that is available for rent. And I think it's going to be a harder place to try to find tenants to rent office space or commercial space. Is primarily in that area, Gray and Main and High, Triangle Street. That's primarily residential, and I think more residential is needed there where they can walk to these services in the downtown area. The other thing is, have you considered existing or pre-existing mixed-use buildings and how they're impacted with a change in a bylaw like this? I have one there on the corner of Main and Gray, and there's a lot of frontage setback there that could be used for residential versus more business that may not attract much. And to some of the small businesses that I've seen and had in one of the properties next door are small office areas, and they don't necessarily need that frontage exposure. A lot of them, attorneys, that type of thing, would rather be toward the back and have parking and ADA access and all that. So I guess I'm just asking that you put a little bit of thought into the BN district and how that's affected by this. And it's really not going to enlighten the streetscape by having some businesses on the direct frontage there, because people really walk to the bus stop, or they walk uptown, they walk to Amherst College or up to UMass or the local schools. So I think it's just a little bit different. And also the issue there on the corner of Main and Gray is I have the frontage on both streets. So as far as working that out. So those are my thoughts, and just ask you that I might take a look at that.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So I don't see any more public comment. Nate, do you want to take some of those comments into consideration as you think about this over the next week or two?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think there's been some good comments and discussion tonight, and I think, I can work with staff on amendments, on changes to this amendment.
Okay. Great. So I guess why don't we just continue this to November 3rd. We're not in a formal public hearing, so we don't need to vote, I don't think. But we'll expect you to come back that night. Let's see, Jack?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'd really, like to hear from, the business, section of town, whether it be Gabrielle Gould or the Amherst Chamber, but I'd like to get their input on this. I'm sure that Nate has consulted with them, but it'd be nice to have their input, with our final sort of review.
All right. Thanks, Jack. Okay, so why don't we move on from this? That's the end of, are there any topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours prior to the meeting under old business?
No, there are not. No.
Okay. Any under new business?
Not that I know of.
All right. Form A&R subdivision applications?
No, not tonight.
Okay. Upcoming ZBA applications.
Yes.
We do.
And Pam do you want to tackle this or do you want me to tackle it?
Well, I can bring up this screen, Chris, and
Good. Okay.
we can, whichever you, I mean, I have these bullet points here that you can pretty much read.
Yeah, so Pam worked with Maureen Pollock on this, and this is very helpful. We are bringing this application, this CBA application, to you because it's so large, and we thought you might be interested in reviewing it. It's a proposal for a solar array PV installation in the northeast corner of town. It's along Shutesbury Road, east of Henry Street and east of Northeast Street. It's pretty large. It's 3 contiguous parcels off Shutesbury Road, and they're all owned by W.D. Coles, and it's in the outlying residential district. The solar array requires a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's currently a working forest, so it would require a fair amount of cutting of trees. It's almost 100 acres. And the disturbance would be a little bit less than half of the site. It's outlined in blue here. Pam drew up this map here to show you where it is. So it will be contiguous with another project in Shutesbury. That's my understanding, or at least another project that will be close by the same company. But obviously the town of Amherst won't be reviewing that. And there's a notice of intent that's been filed with the Conservation Commission because there are wetlands on the site. So the wetlands public hearing will be opened next Wednesday, October 27th. So our question to you is, would you like to have the opportunity to have a presentation on this project and make recommendations to the ZBA? So that's the question.
All right. I see Janet's hand.
I would vote yes. It seems such a significant project with all sorts of impacts, and that's it.
All right, Tom?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the scale of it is something it'd be nice to get a look at and have a conversation about. It is kind of off the beaten path, but it does butt up against what looks like a series of residential plots along the north side of that site there. So I think it's worth taking a look at.
Okay. And gee, I thought I saw Johanna's hand.
I had it up, but I echo Janet and Tom's sentiment that we should take a look at it.
All right. So that's at least 3 members, and that seems like sufficient. That Chris, why don't we put that on the agenda?
Okay.
For when is the ZBA hearing?
We don't have a date for the ZBA hearing yet. All we have is a date for the Conservation Commission. Maureen and Rob Mora are looking at the application for the ZBA. I'm not even sure if it's been filed with the town clerk yet, but we wanted to bring it to your attention early so you could, make a plan to look at it.
Okay. Great. All right. Any other applications you wanted to talk to us about, Chris?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Upcoming SPP, SPR, SUB applications?
You have a new application from Amherst College. They're going to be bringing some signs to you. I think it's 3 signs that didn't make it into the first review. And so that will be coming to you probably November 17th.
Okay.
And there are other things that are out there in the wings, but we haven't actually received applications for those things.
All right. All right. Planning board committee and liaison reports. How about the PC, Jack?
Yeah, I believe that Chris Brestrup forwarded a link to the state of infrastructure projects in Western Massachusetts on a state perspective, and how difficult it is for some of the more poor towns. So that was we had a meeting last Thursday, and that was a very moving presentation by it was Suzanne Bump, who's the state auditor there. And the other thing that was presented was there's ARPA funding available, and that can apply to housing downtown, assisting the digital sort of divide there that might be happening more in the hill towns, and tourism, things like that. So again, I'm sure Chris, you're aware of the potential of that funding and the flexibility of it. But those are two things that were discussed. So
okay, great, thank you. Andrew, anything on CPAC?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. We've got, so there are 18 applications, 5 for community housing, 6 for historic preservation, none for open space, and 7 for recreation. So we have received applications from those 18 folks. We've sent some questions back to them, and they will be giving us presentations starting next Thursday on October 28th, the November 4th, and November 10th. I think, I'm trying to remember what we had last year. I think it was more like 14, so maybe a couple more applications this go around. So looking forward to hearing these proposals.
Great. I have no report on the Agricultural Commission tonight. Tom, how about the DRB?
Yeah, we had a very active signage review last week. Arigato Japanese restaurant downtown is putting up some new signage and done some window work. There is a new lingerie shop, Art of Intimates, that is opened up downtown as well, that has a storefront near Lime Red. So we reviewed their new facade. There is a new Asian rice restaurant on Boltwood that we looked at some signage and wayfinding for. And then there as well on Boltwood, there is a new, what is it? It's like a nightclub. It has multiple indoor and outdoor places within it, again, in the sort of back area of Boltwood. So we looked at some of those signs that were also approved with recommendations. And then lastly, we looked at some signage for a dog park in the professional research area off of Route 9 by Amherst Woods. So yeah, lots of signage, nothing that seems too crazy, but just checking boxes and making sure everyone's in line. So yeah, that's good.
Okay, great. Chris, the CRC?
So I don't think we've met with the CRC for a while. They had a few other things that they were working on, and but they are having a meeting next week, which has 2 public hearings in it. And those are for the rezoning of the parcel behind CVS and for the mixed-use building revisions. So we'll be attending those meetings. Other than that, I don't really have anything to report on the CRC.
Okay.
Oh, those meetings I think I mentioned were 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you want to come, don't come at night.
Okay. Okay. And as for a report of the chair, I really don't have anything yet to talk about. Report of staff, Chris.
I have nothing further.
Okay. All right. So the time is 10:14. It looks like we can adjourn. Thank you all for your time, and thank the public for sitting
Okay.
in with us for this long meeting and for your comments. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.